Okay, the guy you see next to me is the most generous billionaire in the world, and I found him.
Hi, my name is Sam, and this is my story.
Sam has crazy hair. Sam is vegan. Sam sleeps 5 hours a night. Sam lives in the Bahamas with 10 roommates. Sam is 29 years old only, but Sam has $22 billion. And he wants to donate all of it to charity. But why?
Well, for many reasons.
I flew all the way from Dubai to the Bahamas to tell you the incredible story of Sam Bankman-Fried. Ever since Sam was a kid, he wanted to get rich. Really, really rich. But not for the reasons you think.
I wanted to get rich not because I like money, but because I wanted to give that money to charity.
So after graduating from MIT, he went on a mission to get rich. One day, he noticed that the price of Bitcoin in the United States was different from the price of Bitcoin in Japan. And that was an opportunity.
So, Bitcoin is trading at $10,000 on a US exchange, $11,000 on a Japanese exchange. You take $10 million, you buy at $10,000, you sell at $11,000, you make $1 million, and we were able to do that every weekday.
So every weekday you made $1 million in profit just from doing that?
That's right.
Yeah, from this simple idea, he made a total of $20 million. And that was just the beginning. Sam became a crypto trader full-time and started a crypto trading company called FTX.
FTX is a cryptocurrency exchange. It's a place that you would go to buy and sell Bitcoin and other digital assets.
And this is the crazy part. In 2 years, his company became one of the biggest in the world, worth over $40 billion, and he's not even 30 years old. That's impressive. But Sam is not a traditional billionaire because he believes in the concept of earn to give, which means his goal as a human is to make as much money as possible just to give it away. Earn to give. And that's exactly what he's doing.
So let's say that you have $100 and you want to figure out what you can do with it to help the world. Earning to give is thinking about which causes, which charities save the most lives per dollar. This $100 can go as far as it possibly can to help the world.
Last year, this 29-year-old guy donated $50 million. Next year, he's planning to donate $500 million a year. And next decade, he will probably give away more than $10 billion.
The amount of good that you can do for the future of the world is really large, and it's way more than you can do to actually make yourself happy with anything like that amount of money.
And he is funding everything you can think of. Global warming.
It's one of the biggest problems that we have to tackle together as a world.
COVID-19 preparedness.
We have to be ready for the next pandemic.
Neglected tropical diseases.
More than 1 billion people suffer from them. We have to eliminate these diseases.
And of course, animal welfare.
Animals deserve to live just like we do. It's also why I'm vegan.
Sam doesn't need the money to buy a Lamborghini or to buy a Rolex or to impress his friends. In fact, his car is a Toyota Corolla. Hold on, where's your car?
It's that one there.
That's like what, a Toyota?
Yeah, it's a Corolla.
Why don't you buy a Lamborghini, man?
I didn't have any particular need for one.
He wants to get rich in order to impact the world and change it.
Try to think about what are the most important problems facing the world today, and what can you do to help make those as much better as possible.
In the next few decades, Sam may become a trillionaire. He is an example that age is just a number and that making money is not a bad thing as long as you use that money to help the world. All right, we're done, man. Amazing.
Hello, welcome to Broadcasts from Fiddler's Green, my weekly podcast. And today we're going to tell the story of my hero, my absolute hero, my alter ego, Sam Bankman-Fried, which this story, guys, the story goes to the heart of me in so many different ways because this is my tribe. This is the home that I came from, these people. And no, I don't mean tribe of that, obviously, coming from a more Germanic peoples. I don't mean tribe in that sense, but I mean tribe in the general class, in the Northern California native, the son of university people, the son of teachers, the son of academics. Obviously, Sam was more prestigious, more wealthy, and more privileged than I was. But I seem to know him through and through. And he truly is the hero of our age. In so many ways, he's exactly what everyone wanted. He's exactly what everyone wants out of the modern age, out of modern men. He fits it to a T. He couldn't be a more platonically perfect version of the 21st century person. He's perfectly conformed to all of the archetypes. He comes from the right place. He knows the right people. He found the right opportunity, and wouldn't you know it, he's a hero. He's a total hero, guys. He's just the greatest man who ever lived. And I don't know why anyone would doubt that. And I kind of wanted to just delve into this story a little bit and kind of see what we could find. But first, I feel like I have to back up as I usually do with these things. And I have to talk a little bit about crypto. Okay, so obviously we're all on the right wing here. We all know that crypto was a big deal for us, specifically because one of the main right-wing complaints about the modern world, the modern financial system, and this is the chief economic complaint of the right wing for almost 120 years, was the existence of artificial interest rates, money printing, and central banks. Now, I always get into arguments with people, people could give me shit for mentioning these two again, but Adam and Sitch. When they present the right-wing economic plan as being neoliberalism or tax cuts, the right-wing critique of the 20th century really has something to do with tax rates or with trade policy or with corporate governance or even with regulation. The main number one criticism that the right wing has of the modern economic system has to do with money lending and money printing and fiat currency and the extensions from fractional reserve banking. Now, I'm not so sure how much we want to go into finances. I had to talk about finances a little bit. But for anyone who's a complete neophyte to this whole process, we've been allowing fractional reserve banking for basically 200 years, or maybe even longer than that, allowing banks to essentially lend money they don't have out to other lenders and only keep a small amount of it on hand in case there's a run on the bank. But this is compounded with the fact that during the advent of the 20th century, in particular, we switched over to centralized banks, which artificially set interest rates. These central banks could essentially send out loans that are coming straight from the U.S. Mint. They have an unlimited number of money they can lend, and the only thing that controls how much is actually lended is the interest rates, is how much people want to borrow against the Federal Reserve, specifically how much the banks want to borrow against the Central Reserve. This allows the federal government to control the money supply in a way that would have been considered by classic economic theories completely irresponsible and completely inflationary. It can borrow money and then inflate away the debt. It can essentially create an artificially loose currency and encourage people to invest in the market when they wouldn't otherwise. So it has a knob on the economy that is really the influence is hard to First of all, I should say is that the government can essentially spend indefinitely in deficits, as modern governments have, and we're sort of feeling the consequences of that. The second thing is that governments can control the economy by lowering interest rates to encourage spending and investment, which most right-wing economic theorists point out is essentially just giving money to rich people, since poor people cannot borrow at a low interest rate, and under a low interest rate environment, the market always goes up because people are incentivized to buy for buying's sake, but so they do not hold the currency as the currency inflates, and so they don't miss out on opportunity cost of investing that money in the market. This is the main objection that the right wing has had, and throughout the 90s and 2000s, people have been looking for an alternative currency to essentially hedge against governments when their inflationary schemes, when their monetary schemes kind of came crumbling down, as it appears ours might be imminently. And one of the solutions was crypto, obviously. And crypto, I remember buying like a Bitcoin back in the day, and I sold it a few years later. But this was so early that it wasn't even apparent that you could buy less than one Bitcoin. I think I bought like 2 for a few $100s, and I sold them for a few thousand, and the money's gone at this stage, right? But had I held on to them, it would have been worth a whole mint. And I was thinking, wow, like I'm going to be able to use this to transact, and in 10 years I'll just be buying things on a web store with my new crypto wallet, and people will give me money in terms of crypto. This will be a sub-economy. But it didn't really turn out that way, did it? What happened to crypto is that crypto became an asset. Crypto's volatility in the market was incredible. It was so large that it was very, very hard to transact in crypto at all. I mean, I do with Entropy. They pay me the dividends for my super chats in crypto. And, I sell it back into dollars to buy diapers and support family needs and all that sort of stuff. But if it was anything more serious, the volatility of crypto makes it completely unusable for purpose, for currency. And what happened was that people started... I don't know about this. This is something I've sort of philosophically been disagreeing with for a while now. People who've watched my live streams remember basically 13 months ago me saying, you can't consider crypto an avenue of income. It can't be an avenue of income for you. The crypto people were sort of gaga over this idea that crypto supply would always be static. And the amount of new crypto, it's not completely static, but the amount of new crypto tapers off, such that as the demand increases, the supply is static, and this creates this contracting market where it seems like it always grows. But the whole idea of having it as a currency would be that it has a stable value. So the thing for its original design was completely unfit for purpose, and people were just making money off of it, and people were saying, well, you can make a career in crypto. I mean, what does a career in crypto even look like? What value are you generating? What are you actually introducing to the market? And this insanity kind of persisted on the right until you heard a lot of people who should have known better treating crypto like it was some kind of magic piggy bank that you can make good on just by being a person in the market. Okay, but here's the thing. I mean, it turns out you can make money just by being a person in the market. I mean, that's essentially how most people make money who are rich, is that they have money in the market. And the market does well because we have low interest rates inspired by the Federal Reserve, and the line goes up and suddenly their $100 bills become $1,000 bills. And crypto, for a moment, it sounded like, well, crypto is just our way of getting in on this continuously growing economy. It's just our way of experiencing growth the way that the ruling class experiences growth, right? Because everyone's entitled to just sit back and earn money off of nothing. It's expected to have their wealth just tick up naturally. That's just, we are children of the millennial generation. I mean, we don't believe that the market goes down. And the fact that some rich people are getting money for nothing, that just means that they're not cutting us in on the good times, right? So in comes, and I'm hesitant on whether to talk about the man or the company, because I kind of want to talk about both. But maybe I'll talk about the man biographically, right? So Sam Bankman-Fried. So this was a person who was born, God, good Lord, I think 7 or 10 years. He's about 7 or 10 years younger than me, I believe, and he was born very near where I grew up in Palo Alto, California. So Palo Alto is where Stanford is. It's south of San Francisco, and it's a super posh area. It's kind of the portal to Silicon Valley, so to speak. San Jose is kind of the sprawlier version of Silicon Valley, and Palo Alto is where all the bigwigs live, and where all the people who've made it kind of decide the future of the world. And Sam Bankman-Fried, he's the son of 2 Stanford professors in law, and he's a math guy, right? He's a math whiz. I mean, I don't know, how good is he at math? Is he Paul Erdős 2.0? Is he a beautiful mind level math? I don't know if there's any evidence for that, really, to be quite honest. But that doesn't matter, because the story of Sam Bankman-Fried is that he's a math whiz, and he goes to MIT, which is where math whizzes go, or where highly socially promoted, privileged children of elites go. And he convinces them there that he is this paragon of he's not really into math properly. He thought he'd be a professor, but he's really more of a business guy, which translates basically in I know how to read in between the lines of children of overachieving parents. It basically means that he went to school and he realized he wasn't a super genius in a subject and decided to look elsewhere to really make a mark on the world. And so he goes to an investment firm, works there for a few years, and then right when this huge crypto wave was coming on, right when I bought my first few Bitcoins, he decides that he's going to get in on this game, and he's going to make money off it because this is an emergent market. And so I played the little clip here at the beginning of this show with where he basically has a Super Bowl ad explaining his life. And he has this guy from Dubai, this Arabic announcer, who's like, "Oh my God, he's so brilliant. He's so brilliant. He's amazing." It's like, how did you think of this, Sam? How did you see that in some markets, Bitcoin sold for a little more than in other markets, and you could take out a loan and conduct arbitrage and make money off of the difference between the two markets? How did you come up with this brilliant idea? And he's sitting back there smirking, like he just discovered, he just solved the 3-body problem and Gödel's Fermat's last conjecture, and he's just developed the grand unified theory of finance, because he discovered that in some markets or in some countries, Bitcoin sold for more or less than other places. Everyone realized this. This is not a revelation. Like, anyone could see it. It was just, who's going to do it first? Who's the first person that's going to be able to take out billions of dollars and have appropriate amount of collateral so that they can actually make money off exploiting differences in crypto markets through the process of arbitrage, right? I mean, just for those people who are unaware, Bitcoin takes a long time to process. And so if you were to actually send a piece of Bitcoin to somebody else without somebody willing to kind of conduct the transfer, that actually might take a very, very long time. When I first bought Bitcoin from the source, it took like a day to process, at least, maybe a few days, come to think of it. The process of actually trading the Bitcoin is very, very slow. And it's very, very risky, because while you're conducting the trade, the price of Bitcoin can do all sorts of nutso things. And so you need to have an amount of liquid capital to be able to float the possible losses you could receive when you're trading in these cryptocurrencies at all. So Sam Bankman-Fried starts this company called Alameda. And Alameda all it's basically doing, it's just doing what everyone else knew someone would eventually do. But Sam's the first person that can put together a meeting with a bunch of Silicon Valley bigwigs, big investors, and get them to dump like billions of dollars on him, which you need the billions of dollars to conduct this at the scales that it wouldn't be very, very risky, right? Because you could catch a huge crash when you're doing a massive trade, and you could lose all of the money you're doing. So you need to float a lot of collateral for investors. And so he teams up with another one of his friends. I'm looking for her name, Caroline Ellison, who is, again, this is like the was it Nina Jankowicz from previously this year, the prospective ruler of our information supplies. Caroline Ellison is just this cartoon of this millennial woman, whereas Nina Jankowicz was the cartoon of the theater girl. Caroline Ellison is the millennial caricature of the math nerd. She's got big glasses. When she first meets up at a corporate boardroom with Sam Bankman-Fried, she's dressed as a forest nymph, and she talks about Harry Potter. This is in a business environment where billions of dollars are being exchanged, but no, she got a degree. I think she's the opposite. I think her parents were MIT professors, and she got a degree from math from Stanford. So, in the sort of incestuous circles they ran in, she could be CEO of a $1 billion hedge fund, basically, with that limited experience. And by the way, I should mention this. Sam Bankman-Fried, obviously, he's a Californian because of the hyphenated last name, because Bay Area people are so pretentious. They can't just pick a name to give their kids. They have to conjoin the name of the two parents so it's properly equalized. Of course, this is the most short-sighted thing of all time, because your children, they're going to have complete messes of names, especially if two of the conjoined name people marry each other and have kids, which are two things that almost never happen. Them marrying each other and them having kids, which is sort of, short-sighted from the entire endeavor of starting a family, in my opinion. But there you go with these people. But of course, Sam Bankman-Fried, he doesn't call himself Sam. He calls himself SBF, the acronym. Like, he himself as a corporate property, like, he's being publicly traded, like, he's so important, and he comes up in conversation so much, you have to use the acronym just because everyone knows what SBF means. It just means this guy who's this phenomenon all to himself. And so he meets up with this chick, Caroline Ellison, and they go in a session. I think it's with Sequoia Investments. I forget what I think it's Sequoia. And this is a sort of another Silicon Valley hedge fund. And he has a live stream meeting with these guys. Okay, they're making pledges to this guy in real time of millions of dollars, like you're super chatting me right now. People are super chatting me for $1, $2, $3, $5. Okay, that's what you get here in this Zoom meeting. This meeting with investors. These guys are dumping. They ultimately dump $1 billion on him over the course of the meeting. And then afterwards, there's something called a meme round. And I'm not so sure what that means. But they dump another $500 to $600 million on him in the meme round. During this meeting, it's reported that while he's talking with these people and they're giving him billions of dollars, he's playing video games. He's playing League of Legends in the background. I mean, look, guys. There's a reason I have been known on some streams to have been caught multitasking, specifically when I'm on panel shows and there's like 10 other people. My mind wanders. Have I been guilty of not paying full attention to you guys and and delivering good content? Sure, that's the reality, and actually one of the reasons why I switched over to doing these live streams with a camera on me is that the camera helps me keep 100% focus on the moment, on the conversation, on interacting with you guys. So I don't just sort of phone it in. I don't start fidgeting and just saying blather. I'm 100% focused on telling the story or giving you this opinion or whatnot. And that's when the super chats are like $1 or $2. This guy can't keep focus when billions of dollars are being just airdropped into him, into his wallet, so he can create this investment firm, Alameda. So Alameda's deal is that it basically borrows money, and then it buys investments, and then it holds them in arbitrage, and then it sells them in markets that are more favorable. The main one it does this with, although it does it with everything, is crypto. I also believe that Alameda deals in derivatives, which are recombined investments. So it takes investments, recombines them into packages, and then sells them out because they think they can improve the risk profile by aggregating the investment in a way that is useful for people. Okay, that in and of itself is, I think, as a Catholic, as somebody who's critical of the low interest rate capitalism, that they're making money off of money because you can borrow money and play the market that is always going up because we make it always go up through low interest rates, I can find a lot wrong with it, but it's not illegal. But what Sam Bankman-Fried and his friends do next is they create this thing called FTX, which is an exchange that Alameda uses. So Alameda has money that buys crypto. Bankman-Fried creates an exchange. An exchange is sort of like, it's almost like it's not exactly like a bank because it's meant for people to trade there. It's meant for people to buy and sell assets. But because the main stock is crypto, people keep their money on this exchange while the larger companies can buy the crypto and transfer it to them and minimize the risk of sudden spikes and sudden instantaneous losses, and even it out for them. And that service is how FTX would make its money. But this means that the FTX essentially has an enormous number of people with just literal dollars that they're holding, or dollars that are waiting to be transferred into various cryptocurrencies. And so I guess still that's okay. You know, you have the same problem with the usury dimension, right? You're making money off of money because you can borrow money, and now you're just charging people rents so that they can do what you're doing for free. So what Sam Bankman-Fried does next is he creates a token for this exchange, sort of like Monopoly funny money. This token gives you discounts to sell on this exchange called FTX. And so Alameda essentially uses FTX as a trading partner, or sorry, as an exchange location. Not only that, FTX borrows money from Alameda to create its sort of initial money to lend out to people. It borrows money from the hedge fund because it needs money to sort of lend to people so they can actually use the exchange. And what happens then is it issues these tokens, these tokens are only useful to discount your trades on FTX, the exchange. So basically they're worth money, but only when the exchange is operating. So they're completely, so their relative worth is exactly related to how many people are using the exchange and how much money FTX as a company is making as an exchange, which means that they're 100% correlated with, as if they were essentially a stock, although they confer no ownership. So in a move that I can't believe was legal, and, again, I'm not really much of a financial guru. I'm just kind of going from what I've read here. So I apologize if I've made mistakes. Alameda, after lending money to FTX to create the market, then buys an enormous number of the FTT tokens that are essentially stock in FTX. That, I feel like, should already be illegal because of conflict of interest, because there's two people that are obviously both on the buying and selling end of a bargain, and it's unclear who represents which people's interests, other than the people who are making the deal to begin with for their own interests, possibly at the fundamental loss of investors. Okay, but that's not the worst thing, financially speaking. It's not even the second worst thing. After that, Alameda decides that they're going to hold FTT tokens as literal collateral so that they can make more investments in risky cryptocurrencies and other high-risk ventures. Okay, so Alameda is 100% is highly reliant on the success of FTT. Not only that, because it trades there and because FTX owes them money. Not only that, the collateral it's using to make trades is the FTT token, which is essentially just a representation of the health of FTX. This is nuts from a risk management standpoint. This is absolutely insane, because any decrease in the value of FTX would then immediately capsize both companies, which, I would have realized that if you had told me that you were doing that. It's really obvious that this is an incredibly risky affair. Okay. Oh, but that's not the worst thing, right? Because the worst thing is, somewhere along this process of stockpiling these completely useless FTT tokens as collateral to sponsor their risky investments, the crypto goes down. And what happens is, and this I think actually is illegal, is that FTX sells or just takes customer value, customer funds that are sitting on their exchanges, and lends the customers' money to Alameda so that they can be whole and so that they can continue to buy FTTs so that the FTT market doesn't completely collapse. This is just stealing, because guess what? When people caught wind of it, the market did collapse, because everybody who held FTT tokens showed up at once and demanded, like in the bank run of 29, they demanded, rightfully so, their money back. And since the money didn't exist, the money had all been sent to the hedge fund to invest in other risky crypto endeavors. The entire thing, and of course their collateral completely evaporated because it was all based on their own valuation as a company, and the investors, not only did the investors take a huge haircut, the customers took a huge haircut. It was literally that meme from South Park where the guy goes, "Oh, please deposit your currency," and it's gone. It's gone. Yeah, okay, sure. So it's a giant Ponzi scheme. But how did this happen? Like, how did nobody blow the whistle on it? That's. I mean, I guess, sure. I guess Ponzi schemes are a dime a dozen. But we've been through the financial crisis of 2007. We know how these bad accounting practices work. Was anyone looking at these people? According to one of the reports I looked at before the show, their chief risk officer was like a 28-year-old who had 2 years of experience. I still think she should have known that you can't hold collateral in a related. You can't hold what's effectively a related company's stock as collateral in the company that you want to hedge against collapsing. But there appears to be absolutely no oversight to these people. I've just been kind of trying to process this, because we're kind of getting onto the interesting part of this question. This money basically went into the pocket of SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, and his friends. And what they did with the money was they, quote unquote, gave it away. They're part of this school of thought called effective altruism. You saw from the intro video, this guy, he's earning to give. He wants to make the most of your money imaginable. Obviously, like giving the Salvation Army, that's stupid. Putting it to work in your local soup kitchen, that's idiotic. Carnegie buying museums and libraries and theaters, Oh, come on, man, that's quaint 19th century. You don't make the world a better place by building beautiful cities and donating beautiful libraries and creating clean streets and actually giving it to poor people. No, you make the most money by giving it to kind of these good causes like climate change and pandemic relief and preventing tropical diseases and animal cruelty. Well, and I have had, obviously, I don't think anyone knows this right now, is exactly how much of Sam Bankman-Fried's money went wherever. It appears, though, from cursory examination, that it mostly went to the Democratic Party and affiliated NGOs. It basically went to the cathedral. It first went to pandemic preparedness because Sam Bankman-Fried's family is highly connected. His brother runs his brother was a lobbyist. And so he basically set up a company that sold pandemic preparedness during the early years of 2020. What is it? So that's making the world a better place, right? He cuts his own brother a check for $50 million to start an NGO to prepare for pandemics. But what does this NGO do? Mostly lobbying, mostly going to the government and asking for taxpayer money to be given to pandemic relief, and then taking a cut and increasing the size of their own company, right? That we're not silly here, right? We need to grow. We need to earn to give, right, guys? We need to make money so that we can give it away, right? And also, apparently, it went to just literally the Democratic Party. Sam Bankman-Fried was the largest individual donor to Joe Biden's political campaign and to the midterm Democrats this time. He's just right behind Warren Buffett and George Soros, I believe. Although I think he might be above Buffett because I think he was just behind George Soros, which is the number one individual contributor. But that's not counting all of the other global warming causes, which essentially go back into the activism coffer, which leads directly to the Democratic Party. That's effective altruism, guys, right? Because as any good artificial intelligence expert knows, you can't really do the ultimate good unless you have ultimate power. So all of the AIs that want to do the ultimate best thing by their moral standards immediately set their minds to the task of world domination, which is essentially what it looks like most of SBF's money went to. It went to accruing more power. And that was done in the name of charity. He bought influence. He created foundations that bought more influence. And he gave money to other companies and other NGOs that in turn gave him privileged positions. And also, I should say, he bought an enormous propaganda campaign. The first video you viewed at the beginning of this podcast was an example of that. I think there's a smaller version of that aired during the Super Bowl last year, touting him up as the new type of millionaire. He also bought sports stadiums. I think it's the Miami Heat has the FTX sports stadium. They might want to change that one. I don't think that sounds as fresh as it used to. There's a lot of things you could call this process. Altruism is not one of them. But in a supremely interesting event, it also appears that an enormous amount of the money that we've been giving to the Ukrainians have been turning around and investing in choice hedge funds. One of the most prominent ones was Alameda and FTX. So that's great because the money that goes to the Democratic Party gets given to Ukraine and then invested back into FTX. And then given back to the Democratic Party. And all along the way, while we're spending the dollar in the most beneficial way for humanity, all of these people are sticking their fingers into the pie and taking out their little share of money and mostly power as it goes around. The entire thing is completely nepotistic. and I don't know. I'm getting into the details of this. I'm probably leaving out some things. Just the fact also that almost every one of Sam Bankman-Fried's family members and friends and business consultants have strong ties to the World Economic Forum. I mean, like, they're rubbing shoulders with them. They're going to the events in Davos. These are highly connected people. And they share a very similar vision for the future. Of course, I think I saw that effective altruism commercial I didn't even know who Sam Bankman-Fried was, but someone sent me the commercial that I aired at the beginning of this podcast because we were talking about effective altruism. Effective altruism is, it's an idea that came from the early 2000s, and it was popular on blogs like Traditionalist Codex and a lot of like Eliezer Yudkowsky, less wrong people, the rationalists as we know them. They're kind of a sister community to NRX back in the day. And the effective altruists were like, we're going to do new atheism, but we're going to do the big brain version of new atheism. And what was so odd about the commercial when we were discussing effective altruism was that he lists 3 causes in that commercial. He lists global warming, tropical diseases, and animal cruelty. Oh, I guess tropical diseases, pandemic preparedness could also be included in that. And, this is, what's so funny is that I've read things by people like Bjorn Lomborg, who worked in groups of economists that go back to this group of economists called the Real Madrid. Oh, I think they were basing it off of Football Reference, or the Dream Team. I think they called themselves the Dream Team. It's these economists from all different countries. They got together and they said, well, putting politics aside, how can we spend a dollar the most effectively to save a life? And the causes they came up with solving were all things that had to do with sewage and dam construction and infrastructure and roads and maybe an odd jobs. I don't know about jobs programs, but I guess all of these infrastructure projects double as job programs. They were all supremely unsexy things. Whereas the stuff like global warming and animal cruelty and that stuff, that came in dead last. And they did this multiple times. So not only is it effective altruism, which is bullshit, it's not even real. These causes that are the most effective way to spend a dollar, they're all completely made up. The global warming, spending money on global warming does not give you the most bang for your buck. To save human lives, even if you accept the IPCC results 100% with zero skepticism and with zero allowance for exaggeration, a dollar spent on global warming is one of the least effective ways to spend a dollar to save a life, because all the consequences are so far in the future. What we stumbled upon is, and I don't know. What am I trying to say? What's the point of this conversation? Other than me just seeing Sam Bankman-Fried and thinking to myself, you are exactly like the people I went to high school with. You're exactly like my math nerd friends in Northern California. You talk the same. You have the same shitty hygiene. You have the same boring opinions. You have the same soulless, myopic way of viewing the universe, where everything is a giant spreadsheet that you need to optimize for. You have the same lack of presence in everything that you're doing. One of the things I found so interesting about the commercial is you've got this Arab guy from Dubai who's exuberant and hopping around and like he's, oh my God, it's so great. Some people find that very, very off-putting. I actually kind of find the exuberant fakeness of the UAE salesman to be kind of refreshing next to the stodgy soullessness of FBS and his little, in his broken calculator for a heart. This is the Arab guy is selling you, and you know he's selling you, and he's happy that he's selling you. And when he takes your money, at least he's going to be happy doing something with that money and spending on his actual family, getting them actual goods to continue on the actual line of his Arabic peoples and the actual faith of his Arabic fathers. Sam Bankman-Fried's is going to be a dead end genetically, a dead end culturally, and is only a cog in the wheel to increase the power and profit of other similarly soulless people who are living in a completely fictional universe that doesn't actually exist. These people are all completely checked out. They're all logged into their own delusions. Maybe the first revelation I'll start with is this. I know everyone tries to make the World Economic Forum out to be these complete villains. They're absolutely villains. Don't get me wrong. These people are evil, and they're absolutely destroying our world in so many different ways. They're corrupt to the core. But these people are not masterminds. They are delusional people. They're completely checked out of the real world. They're living in a fantasy world that was built by the boomers and no longer makes sense by its own logic. And SBF is their child. SBF is their child physically. He's their child intellectually. He's their child spiritually. And this is the world they set up for him. This is the path they've put him on. And he did the best he could by them, which is giving them power. A little bit of power for a little bit of time. A little bit of money, a hot flash in the pan, a dream of effective altruism solving all of the world's problems. And it's all dust now. Sam Bankman-Fried himself also appears to be a complete mess. The guy, very plausibly, and I don't know how much to believe these rumors, was in a polygamous relationship with all of his co-business people. They were literally sleeping together, or I don't know all of them, but a lot of them were all living together in this penthouse in the Bahamas so he could avoid paying taxes on the enormous amount of wealth he was swinging by essentially selling investors a Ponzi scheme. And all the way, all the while, they're telling themselves how progressive they are in this commitmentless relationship that has absolutely no substance to it outside of orgasms, and probably not even very good ones, to be honest. Outside of orgasms and delusional references to Harry Potter. I mean, think back to the president of Alameda who showed up to work dressed as a sultry wood nymph. These evil world, it's digital. It's completely it's paper. It's fake, and they're playing for fake prizes. They don't mind losing money because they don't know what money means. They don't see why did you buy a Camry and not a Ferrari? Well, it's because I have no need for a Ferrari. No, dude, it's because you have no appreciation for a Ferrari. It's not like I guarantee you. I mean, you can look at the. I mean, I'm heavy for my. I mean, I have the PhD pounds that I talk about all the time. I'm overweight. I shouldn't be casting stones. But you can tell from Sam Bankman-Fried's physiognomy that this guy is not a monk. He's not wearing a scapular and flagellating himself and fasting so he can give another crust of bread to the poor. This person is not Simone Weil. And we can get into a discussion about whether Simone Weil was a fraud or a saint some other day. But at least, fraud or not, she was certainly living what she preached. And Sam Bankman-Fried is not. He plays video, apparently, according to the rumors, he plays video games during business meetings, and he probably does not eat a very healthy diet based on his physiognomy. This guy is absolutely addicted to creature comforts. The reason why he doesn't buy a Ferrari is that he doesn't appreciate a Ferrari. If you're playing video games during a business meeting where $1 billion is being casually dropped on you, your creature comforts have already probably lost you the value of 3 or 4 Ferraris. So don't tell me that creature comforts have no register on this person's mind. He is a slave to creature comforts. The reason why he's not using the money is that he doesn't have the vitality to use the money. What's his face? Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate did this great video after the the SBF fiasco, this little TikTok video. I really don't like, well, actually, I appreciate him as a character in our present moment because I think that his existence is instructive. It's a good learning and a good example of learning. And Andrew Tate apparently is converted to Islam, and I think that's very fitting because his example dovetails very nicely with the Arab guy that played next to SBF on the commercial that I played at the beginning of this video. And he repeated what I did. He said that anytime a guy does not spend his money on creature comforts, it shows that he doesn't understand what the money actually is. And I don't actually believe that's true. I do believe that there are some saint kings. I do believe that there are some people who genuinely are in positions of power that are selfless individuals. I'm a Catholic. I guess I have to believe that existed historically. But Andrew Tate is right. It's rare. And I'd much rather have the opulent Arab emir like Tate or like that guy from the literal UAE who's viscerally involved in living it up and appreciates the money because at least he knows what's at stake. At least he can hold $100 bills in his hand and he can feel the visceral pain of having it taken away from him. He can think, this $100 could buy me this. And now that I don't have it, I don't have the $100 anymore and I'm really, really upset. Sam Bankman-Fried isn't real enough to experience things that way, and it's obvious that he isn't, and none of his colleagues are either. The polygamous relationship kind of sets it off for me, and people were trying to dunk on the whole polygamous thing. Obviously, a lot of the other rationalist people back in the day, they were all into polygamy as well. I wouldn't be surprised if SBF actually read these blogs. A lot of these effective altruist peoples from the early days of the blogosphere were, well, polygamy is just efficient. You just have to get over your jealousy. Okay, and maybe you can get over your jealousy. And obviously, I believe that marriage is divinely ordained to be a certain way. And so, just on sacramental principles, I would reject polygamy as a Christian. But even putting my Christianity aside, there is nothing non-jealous about the polygamy that the effective altruists practice. You know why? Because they don't actually value the relationships or commitments that they're giving away. Anyone can give away something that they don't value. Anyone can give away money when money doesn't mean anything to them. Anyone can sit back. It's just signs on the screen. And those relationships in that polygamous relationship, I guarantee you it was an orgasm cue card. And the relative value of any person in the polycule was essentially how much better their experience would be relative to a pornographic experience. The reason why there's no jealousy is there's no love. The reason why there's no ownership is that they don't understand what the value of money is, because we systematically unlearned what ownership is over the course of the last 120 years through the process of this casual relationship with money. Again, I think that this is just why everyone has to strive to fight the bug man inside of them. There's no utility in following this path. That even if you're opposed to the World Economic Forum, even if you're somebody who's based in theory, they're completely based right wing, Uncle Ted pilled, what have you. There's a constant internal struggle to avoid falling into this path of simulacrum, because I think Sam Bankman-Fried is a Potemkin person, and so are all his friends. The reason why they're so much into this effective altruism stuff is they don't even know why they have the money to begin with. Why do they have the money? Why do these people have the money? I know the story they're telling to investors. I know the story they're telling to investors. They're going to the investors and say, oh, look at me. I'm a math nerd who is a brilliant person in high school, and I have this PhD or master's degree from MIT or Stanford. Even the accent I'm using is way too characterful, because you heard Sam's voice, and it sounds just like this monotonous. I mean, it basically sounds like every math nerd kind of autistic voice you've ever heard. And they're telling everyone that they're these brilliant individuals. They can crank the numbers. But what numbers were they cranking again? The reason why we got rid of usury back in the day, the reason why we even allow people to lend money, is that I think we rightfully understood that banks in a controlled form provide a useful service. They give people time and they handle risk. And so people with money, essentially when they give a loan out for a reasonable interest rate, what they're doing is that they're giving people time with that money that they wouldn't ordinarily have. And they're assuming a certain amount of risk that the people who are spending the money on an investment an investment opportunity couldn't possibly sustain. And for that reason, a bank is allowed to transfer money from rich people who don't know what to do with it to young people who are willing to take risks. And in the aggregate, it can provide a service to society at an appropriate interest rate. Now that we've nationalized interest rates, what the hell is going on? The interest rate's not set by the bank or by a circumstance. It's artificially lowered. So everyone's investing, regardless of whether the investments are good or not. Just as long as they beat the interest rate on the currency itself, it's a good investment. And of course, all of the funds are completely hedged against in terms of risk profile, which brings me to my next question, is that the whole idea of these hedge funds is that they're supposed to be actually handling risk. That they're these quantitative geniuses that can just map out all of the CVAR calculations. They can do the machine learning and the optimization, and they always get it right. Well, congratulations. Because it looks like you just made a mistake that lost $30 to $100 billion, $2 billion of which is just literally stolen from customers, based on math that an elementary school student would know, and that even me, with my absolute dearth of financial experience, can say is a horrible idea. I mean, hedging a company, what effectively is stock in a subsidiary company, that's insane. And look, if you don't want to hear it from me, you can. These people are not doing math. These people are not doing. I have a clip lined up here. So this is the other genius involved with the endeavor. This is Caroline Ellison explaining her. I hope this video plays properly. But this is Caroline Ellison explaining her contribution to the company.
Yeah, absolutely could pull it off without my math degree. Use very little math. Use a lot of elementary school math. Being comfortable with risk is very important. We tend not to have things like stop losses. I think those aren't necessarily a great risk management tool. I'm trying to think of a good example of a trade where I've lost a ton of money. Well, I don't know. I probably don't want to go into specifics too much with that.
Okay, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's basically it, right? I mean, you can tell the story. The story that she told in that interview was not the story she told investors. The story she told investors is, I'm a brilliant math genius that can do risk equations and stochastic differential equations like you wouldn't imagine, and you should hand over billions to me because I'm so much smarter than you. And I have your values as well. I'm a responsible millennial who really values progressive causes. That's not the person who gave that interview. The person who gave that interview, she admits she doesn't do math that's beyond an elementary school level, as is obvious. I mean, I'm sure they have software that does this complicated math for them that they've bought from consulting firms. I'm sure they have quants that they've hired for millions of dollars to review the books, which apparently they've ignored. I'm sure that that these things are all done, but it's not done by the people who are actually leading the company. And their instincts are 180 degrees in the opposite direction. These people are completely misguided about how you actually manage other people's money because they have no concept of other people's money. And here is the critical moment where this last video demonstrated, where this kind of made everything fall into place about these people. Carolyn says at the end of the interview, they ask her, like, how much is the most you ever lost in a deal? And she can't remember a single time she's lost money on a deal. It's not in her mind. This woman has no idea what it's like to lose anything. Ever. And the same thing with Sam Bankman-Fried. Every step of his entire career has been a string of victories. They've either been real victories because he's slightly smarter than the average person, or they've been artificial victories that have been some combination of privilege and circumstances set up so that he could smash the barriers and then get on to the next level, because basically his connections guarantee him this place in society, and they guarantee him a complete immunity from all consequences. And so you have these leaders that have absolutely no idea what the value of money is. They have absolutely no idea what the value of risk is. They have absolutely no idea what a loss feels like. They have no idea what the value of a real relationship is. And they have no idea what the value of human life is. And they're the ones being put in charge of managing these finances. And what do they end up doing ultimately? Is they end up just giving more power to power. They give money back to the people, back to the NGOs like the World Economic Forum, back to the Democratic Party, back to whatever weird financial network is fighting the Ukrainian-Russian war and apparently winning. They just give it back to them. And all the while, they cheat their investors. They rip off people who come to the party lately. And it doesn't even register on their radar as them doing something wrong. It's just kind of like this weird detail of this video game they're playing. Some person, I had an offhand remark about 3 years ago, and people said that this was like a revelation, or one person told me this was a revelation for them. But I'll say this again. Women are right to prefer jocks to nerds. Actually, society is right to prefer jocks to nerds. Jocks are better rounded than nerds are, either of the anime or the science fiction or the math and science variety. And the reason why jocks are better than nerds is that jocks understand first of all, how to be present in this world, how to have an actual investment in physical reality and not in abstractions. And the second thing, perhaps the more important thing that the jocks understand that the nerds don't, at least modern nerds don't, is jocks understand what it means to actually lose. There is no football player. There are many nerds who've gone through their entire careers never gotten anything less than an A. And modern high school and modern college encourage that process. And I'm a victim of it myself. I'm a victim of social promotion myself. I had a horrible time losing because I just didn't understand what loss was. And I had a horribly scented philosophy when it came to loss. And I didn't know how to process it. As a nerd, most nerds go through their life without having a single loss. A single meaningful loss. They just have a string of victories and a string of sort of simulated experiences that are ultimately of no consequence. That is a blueprint for a bad leader. You couldn't create a worse leader if you tried. And this is sort of where I think the story gets dark. Because I think that the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world, these are the people who are ruling us. There's not. These are the people who are the up and coming people at the State Department, who are writing Joe Biden's speeches, who are telling them what to say in front of the teleprompter, who are appointing all of the sort of weird trans people into the cabinet positions, and who are fast tracking all the social issues. These are also the young people who are slowly taking over places like the World Economic Forum and designing our future. These are all people who are delusional children of privilege and of power, and who only know how to flatter power. And they don't know how to interact with the real world. You might ask a question that we kind of didn't answer, is that, a lot of these companies like Sequoia that invested in Alameda and FTX early on, I mean, I believe they have the right to full transparency. They could have looked at these guys' books before they cut them billion-dollar checks. Why didn't they? Why didn't they demand to have the adults in the room? Why didn't they demand more oversight? Well, it's because the system isn't working anymore. FTX fell because there was no Silicon Valley boom. There was no infinite growth. Everyone is expecting the world economies to grow at like 2 to 5% year on year. The GDP has to go up because we have to pay for all of the entitlement programs. We have to pay for the boomers. And so everyone is, and we have to make sure, like inflation too, right? We print money from the Federal Reserve and we invest it in the market. And the reason why we can do that, the reason why this doesn't cause instant inflation until recently, is that year over year, we grew the economy in real terms, in terms of products, faster than the actual inflation rate went up, or faster than the money supply went up. And because of that, inflation was minimal. But now we're seeing the end of that. There are no new markets that are opening up. There are no new technologies that are creating these revolutions in human enjoyment or human thriving. In fact, the last revolution, the internet revolution, seems to have detracted from human thriving more than it has contributed to it at all. Across so many different spheres, it's hard to really enumerate them. There's no more growth in this economy. And yet we have a need for growth. So what's happening is that all of these financial institutions are throwing money at every single company that's claiming that it has a risk-free balance sheet that can grow at an incredible rate. Because if they don't, those hedge funds can't essentially sell themselves as a solution to governments to fix the Social Security crisis. BlackRock is a good example of that. Actually, I think BlackRock and these other sort of real estate fraudsters, they're actually dealing in real value. Unfortunately, what they're actually doing, in effect, is buying up land in Western countries and selling it off to investors in third world countries, or selling it off to new immigrants from third world countries. They're literally selling the land from under the descendants' feet in order to meet the growing need to keep the line going up, so we can feed the beast on insolvable government spending and insolvable entitlement programs. That's what's driving this. And the people that they put in charge are the people who aren't going to ask any questions about the process. You need Sam Bankman-Fried to run this insane machine, because all Sam Bankman-Fried's going to do is believe the propaganda that he was told in college, create financial shenanigans that sell the idea that infinite growth is possible and that making money is ethical, as long as you give it to the right causes, which are essentially the powerful, again, through more nefarious means. And he's just gonna solve all of the problems, and he's not gonna ask any complicated questions like, okay, so what value have I actually generated? Say I didn't give my money away to all of these good causes. Just in my business practices, how has the company that I have founded make things better for humanity? And the answer is, it doesn't. All it does is move money around from market to market and take risks that it's not even properly managing with investors' money and apparently customers' money. And Even if the thing wasn't fraudulent, that would be an active detriment to society. It's like that phrase from the movie of the same name, playing God with other people's money. And not even a very good God. You know, a God that's not even present in his own reality. A toy God, if you want to borrow a term from my talk from the Sildings event. It's totally fake. I don't know. It's sort of weird because I was reading this article from Fisted by Foucault. Foucault, Fisted by Foucault. It's a blog by Niccolo, what's his face? Argentino, I think is his nickname. And he was saying, very rightfully so, that the global American empire has won. It smashed the Republican Party, its domestic rivals. It smashed conservative parties in Western Europe. It's properly isolated Eastern European dissidents. The Chinese economy is in shambles, largely because it can't handle its own coming demographic collapse. And it's managed to fight Russia to a complete stalemate in Ukraine, maybe even an eventual victory with very, very minimal investment in Western blood. It's conquered the world. But it hasn't conquered reality. Because it's not producing what it promised. It's producing nothing but squalor and death. And it's become more and more brittle. I don't see how anyone believes in this anymore. I don't see how anyone believes in the dream of the center left. Everyone who has a soul and who has awareness of where the world is going on the left is reaching for some more radical solution, whether it's anarchism or Marxism, Leninism. But even on that front, right? Does anyone think that anarchism isn't just some kind of toy of the university class? That the fashionable way to rebel against your betters? No one lives as an anarchist. No one has anarchist churches they go to and anarchist communities. Your polycule doesn't operate under anarchist principles. Oh, and by the way, just so I don't forget this, there's a Tumblr associated with Caroline Ellison. I don't know if this is a rumor or not, so take it with a grain of salt, where she's talking about her attitude towards polyamory. And on this Tumblr, she says, well, I'm really into polyamory because we're going to do it right this time, guys. Everyone's talking about equality in polyamory, but really that's not properly best practices. The best practice is to have like a ranking system, the way the Chinese did it in Chinese harems. You need to see where you stand in the polyamorous structure so you can really go to it and lean in and get to the top. Spoken like a woman who's never had a loss in her entire life. Get to the top of what? Get to the top of a zero-sum game? Get to the top of a plural relationship? Because every single rung of the ladder you climb in a polycule is one rung down. You're going to knock all the people that are supposed to be in the family together. You only grow up by putting the other person down. And you only gain your rank by essentially humiliating everyone who loses theirs. And anyone who's been in a relationship, who has had one fail, understands that losing that is so much more painful. It's almost more painful than the things that existed in that relationship were good or affirming. Or firm, because once that thing crumbles away from you, it's almost like a religion that perished in front of your eyes, because it poisons everything that came before it. The person who, if I've known people who've done these like ranked polyamorous relationships, they sound like the most miserable thing ever, because if you go from being primary to being tertiary, and like this is your relationship. I mean, imagine being demoted in your own marriage. How would that not be just the most humiliating thing ever? It would poison even if you did accept the concept of polygamy, it would poison everything about that relationship going up to it. You can just be let go. like it's a corporate job. You didn't make the grade. You weren't cost effective. You weren't working out for the team quite as well. Better luck next quarter, right? Keep those performance numbers up. Lean in, and that's the world these people live in. It's autism, the dystopia. It's a world of soulless bugmen, and the autists can't see what's right in front of their noses. They can't see the obvious crisis that anybody could see just with their bare instincts. I know I talk about this every single time, but my favorite example of modern leadership is Jeremy Irons from Margin Call. And he is the president of a hedge fund, just like our good friend Carolyn Ellison. But it looks the Jeremy Irons character. It looks like he played a good amount of cricket and rugby at Oxford or Cambridge or wherever he went to school. This is a guy who's lived life, who's very vital. And unlike Carolyn, he doesn't know the last thing about math and openly admits that, because he knows that his job isn't to be a mathematician, it's to be a big picture person. It's to instinctually guess what's happening, what's going on, what's bullshit, and what's real. And that's the mark of a good leader, and that's what's nowhere to be found anywhere. I fear the World Economic Forum, but not because I think that they're going to successfully execute a great reset. They're going to successfully drive the world civilization off a cliff and into war and disaster. And they'll do this with the help, every step of the way, of these millennials and Zoomers that have completely lost touch with reality. We can't be among the people who have lost touch with reality. Fight the inner bugman any way you can. And with that, that is the strange tale of Sam Bankman-Fried. I know this wasn't exactly I don't know. I feel like I had to comment on this person just because somehow this person felt close to me. It felt close to my experience. I feel like I just intimately know this person. And I infinitely know how all of them are going to end up. They're going to come in contact with actual reality. They're going to understand what losing actually is. And when they do understand what losing is, they're going to become just as petty and just as grasping as the jocks they look down on in high school. Anyway, on to the super chats, guys. Thank you for being patient. And I will hopefully get through all the entropy chats and then read our psalm of the day. All right, Ben White. Hi, Dave. I saw the mother of a trad family at our local parish festival. I was talking to her, and she brought up the fact that her eldest daughter, 20 years old, was working until 8 p.m., but she would be there later. Long story short, she wasn't there. There's a 1 out of 2 here. Considered reaching out to the daughter via text, but then I thought, blessed Karl of Austria wouldn't use text messages to talk to trad Catholic women. What should I do? Ha ha ha. Well, I mean, have you ever met this woman? I mean, right? I mean, if you have reason to believe that she's a prospect, I would engage with her in an organic way. Look, I mean, the best way to this is sort of the tragedy of modern dating, is that back in the day, the best way to meet women would be through an organic process, because when women who see men in person behave differently when they see them on the screen. This is why the online dating apps, in particular Tinder, have been such a complete plague on heterosexual relationships. If you can engage this woman as a functionary of an event that she's attending, that would be ideal. Now, one girlfriend I dated, not the woman I married, but I met her when I was literally catering a parish event. Like I was cooking a huge dinner for a group of people after an adoration mass. And the first time I met her, I had an apron on and I was distributing pasta. Kind of a messy job, right? But I was in a professional capacity. I was doing something. I was putting something in front of her. And that was like an amazing intro. That was an amazing intro because I was, it was a way of sort of nonchalantly say hello to her and not have to think of a reason for talking to her to begin with. And if you can cultivate those moments with women, they're invaluable because women remember them, and and women are all about first impressions. I hate to say it, but getting your first impression wrong with a woman, sometimes it works out. Sometimes you can have a second impression that just completely upend. You can do a Harry meets Sally type deal where you can do a second or third impression that completely upends what she thinks she knows about you from another context. But there's something better than the first impression. So if you can be part of the background of something she's doing anyway, and you have reason to believe that she's a prospect, which I have no idea why. If you can create that circumstance, I would go for that. But anyway, man, thanks for the dating update. It's always good to hear from Ben White because we always hear from his dating exploits. Nerve AMV Maker, for some reason, why can't I select this? Give me a second, guys. Every time. Okay, let me make the screen bigger. Okay, this creates just as many problems as it solves, of course. I wish Entropy could get their selection system together. All right, Nerve AMV Maker, your chat's not showing up. I'll read it out anyway because I have no idea why it's not showing up. Oh, and then it disappeared. Well, that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Bear with me, guys. Bear with me. I apologize for the dead air here. Oh, man, this is terrible. Well, while I find this, I will go back and do Nerve AMV Maker's tweet super chat later. I'm just going to continue on going with the super chats here. Alejandro this one is from Alejandro. Good Lord, what is going on here? Apparently none of them are pinning. Oh, that one's a question. That's one reason why it's not doing it. Alejandro Socorros for $3 USA. 25M Catholic revert. I assume you mean 25 years old. Still have doubts, but seeking community, friendship, and a wife. Torn between a big city where there are larger communities of religious young adults, not just Catholics, and not wanting city life. A common problem, but still, where to move? Well, I mean, you're 25 years old. If you don't have a wife, you could always move to the city, find a wife, and then move out of it. I wouldn't recommend moving into a metropolis that's rapidly crumbling, which in America seems like it's almost all of them. But I think that certainly if you don't think collapse is imminent in that area, a tried and true method is to go and seek your fortunes in the city before eventually moving out to the countryside. Countrysides are good, guys, but like for long term, but you really have to have a plan because it's really easy to move to the countryside and be totally isolated from any young people. And I don't exactly know what you do with that. I get that like you can now work from the countryside, but I have no idea how you're going to meet other young people in these bedroom communities that have no young people in them. I don't think that's a particularly good circumstance for most young people. So I would be careful of that, seriously. Nervan VMaker, is it possible that you could repose your question if you're watching this? Because I seem to have completely lost your chat. And, yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, let's go on. Okay. Turner Reeves for $10 USA. Curtis advocates for for Caesarism and has a popular following. Why does he not become Caesar himself? Is it due to his lack of ultimate values or lack of virtue? Curtis and Land are non-religious, yet NRX on the ground seems to require ultimate values and telos. What prevents Yarvin from advocating telos? Well, I think that I can give you the reason why Yarvin is not becoming Caesar. Two reasons is that the first one, most obvious, is that he absolutely does not have the temperament of a ruler. He has the temperament of an intellectual. And the second reason is he doesn't have the means to become a Caesar. In order to become a Caesar, you have to have actual power or actual avenues to power. And that means you have to have elite connections, which Curtis does not have, obviously, other than potentially Peter Thiel. And for those two reasons, it's very, very obvious why he's not becoming a Caesar. The reason why Nick Land and Curtis don't advocate a telos is more complicated. Because the obvious thing is that, first of all, let me steel man this position. First of all, historically, in sort of the Spenglerian cycles, Caesar is not a person who brings religion. He brings order. And the order that he ushers in is essentially an atheistic one. It's a non-believing one. And it's one that is, in a sense, hollow. The Flavian emperors and the Judeo-Claudian emperors proceeded over a complete collapse of the Roman religion and a complete demographic collapse of the Roman ruling class, of the Roman Brahmin class, if you want. And in many ways, Christianity and the growth of Christianity was a response to the total collapse of pagan religion. That was essentially, it was brought about by the collapse of the Republic before Caesar, but his presence on the world stage indicates that there is essentially no more ruling by belief. There's essentially no more rulership by spirit. There's only rulership by technique and by order and by military, and even that will fade away. So I think that a lot of historians are right in saying that the only true Caesar is sort of a more or less values-neutral Caesar. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer, because Caesar will have to be minimally concerned with the health and well-being of the people. And at this point, it's impossible to be neutral on progressivism, because at this stage, progressivism is just so unhealthy for everyone. Look at Sam Bankman-Fried. Does he look like a healthy person psychologically, physically, spiritually, in any way? That the guy looks, he looks ill, to be quite honest, and he's suffering from a psychological virus of modernity, and progressivism is the handmaiden of that virus, and because of that, they're going to lose. A Caesar cannot be ideologically neutral to that. That being said, for the last month, Curtis has been writing these articles about things like truth engines and truth markets, and how do we create a values-neutral way of getting at the truth and determining human health. What's the minimum viable religion? This is a failed project. There can be no minimum viable religion. There can be no religion in general. All religion is particular, and I'm going to say this once more, there can be no value-neutral system of determining truth. Academic agent, I'm talking to you. Your project of trying to recapture postmodernism for the right is a failed project. Because at the moment when you embrace postmodernism for the right, you're embracing intellectual death. Because there can be no value-neutral way of determining truth, period. And I've said this in every single live stream I've done. I talked about Yarvin, and every single one I point out this problem. And I don't know what to say. I can repeat. It's so simple. It's almost boring. It's so simple. And yet people keep on making it. Yarvin's making it in one direction, and I think academic agents making it in a completely different one. There can be no value-neutral truth, and there can be no value-neutral politics. Okay, I'm desperately trying to find NerveAMV Maker's tweet. Okay, I'm assuming NerveAMV Maker that this last super chat is yours. Okay, great. I'm going to assume that this is your super chat here. NerveAMV Maker says, toys are made to be displayed instead of played with. They are also insanely expensive. It is very hard to purchase nice toys for my nephews because of this. Okay. Yes. Well, I say this as a man whose income is, a lot of it goes to buying toys. I think you're talking about an older set here. I've had no problem with toys being, only for display. When I've given, obviously I have a 2-year-old, so it's not a problem. all the toys he has get banged around a ton. They're all action toys at this stage. But I assume he means more stuff like action figures and okay, so did I read the last part? Well, okay, what's the first part if that's the last part? Okay, you want to clarify that question, NerveAMV Maker? You have to reply me for me to see it. But I guess when I started buying toys for older children, I think I will find that they're sort of not appropriate. They're not meant to be played with. I think maybe that could be because they're being sold as collectibles so that older people, like adults, can buy them because of the whole nerd culture thing. But that's neither here nor there. Maybe you can follow it up with more. I'll basically just answer any reply from NerdAMV Maker that I see in the chat when I check back in on it in lieu of the super chat. So yeah, I'm sorry for losing that, but hopefully I can find it again properly. But I hope that answers your question, Turner Reeves. I'm going to go on to the next one. Tildo the Yagan. Again, not pinning. Tildo the Yagan for $25. On a semi-not recent stream, you recommended the movie Strange Days. I watched it and I was absolutely floored with how I had not heard about it. It was very good. It was a very good recommendation and a scary, prescient movie. Are there any similar recommendations for the cyberpunk or near future sci-fi like that, which are less well known? Like Strange Days, it's hard. So guys, like there's Altered States. That's one that usually comes up on most lists. I could do a list of sort of obscure movies. Existenz would be another cyberpunk movie that comes up on lists of. But I think Existenz was a David Cronenberg movie. But I think it's actually one of his worst movies. But if you were to ask me obscure cyberpunk movies, I definitely think of that one. Dark City hardly counts. That was a more mainstream one. Although I very much enjoyed Dark City. That was a very good popcorn movie, a very good science fiction movie from the late 90s. I think The Matrix ruined it all, but there were a bunch of cyberpunk movies in the 90s that were really, really good. Strange Days is good because it took realism very, very seriously, and it didn't try to sugarcoat anything, and I think Strange Days is a great, great movie, and it was prescient. Basically, it told the truth about modernity. which is that the problems that existed in the 90s are only going to stay with us and get worse, and that technology is not going to create new problems or change the problems or solve them. It's just going to amplify the same problems we've been dealing with since basically the end of World War II. And that was the message of Strange Days, and it came true. Off the top of my head, I'm having a really hard time remembering a good cyberpunk movie that was like obscure. For some reason, movies, I think, here's another, I mean, if you want a prescient sci-fi movie, this was far from obscure, but Children of Men is the most prescient dystopian movie of the last 20 years. Children of Men is the world that we're moving into rapidly, and that we need to prepare ourselves to experience, and that we will experience in short order. And yeah, it's depressing, but that is probably the most prophetic science fiction movie. There's a huge drop-off in indie sci-fi around the time of The Matrix, to the point where I can't even think of any sci-fi movies that were particularly indie that I've seen recently that were very notable. The found footage phenomenon also kind of made it that debut. There were a bunch of found. There was one called Monsters, and another one called Troll Hunters that were sort of these found footage monster movies, but they were really bad. They had these found footage movies that came up around the Blair Witch Project and later Paranormal Activity. They have sort of a utility in their shock value, but they've got no message. They've got no larger point to them. And the problem is that when millennials started making movies, millennials as a generation had absolutely nothing to say. And their movies were sort of hollow and based on experience and based on novelty. And because of that, it's after the 90s, we never got movies like Strange Days or Altered States or even Existence. All those kind of fell by the wayside. If I think of one over the course of this stream, I'll mention it. All right, 21st Century Reaction. That is a question bar one. 21st Century Reaction says, unlike the left, for $25, unlike the left, $70. Oh, wow. Oh, thank you. Unlike the left, we can still live our dreams, but I believe that they can live theirs too. Just like $70, but I want to give you 70 times 70. And this is for everyone viewing too. Say the prayer, Mater Dolorosa Ora Pro Nobis. The game of unearned credit isn't possible with currency, but it is possible in spirituality. You can talk to me whenever you want. Well, 21st, I do need to have you on the stream. I talk to you frequently during Settlers Laments streams, but I haven't ever talked to you personally. I loved your speech at the Sildings conference, and I got special permission to publish mine, so I don't want to say you can publish yours, but I think if it ever does become public, people should watch it. I don't exactly know about what you mean by... sorry. But I believe the left can live theirs too. By that you mean that they'll live them in simulation, because I think that the left's dreams are characterized by their fakeness. And because only in fakeness can narcissism be satisfied. And because of that, the left will live its dreams, but they'll live them as a video game. They'll live them as a simulation. They'll live them as an element of the metaverse or whatever. But they're not going to live them in any way like I'm kind of living my own, right, with a family. I'm not saying like I'm rolling in dough or anything, but I'm doing all right, I guess. The imminent collapse of the world notwithstanding, I'm blessed for that reason, and I should thank God more. And you're right to direct people to say the prayer, Mater Dolorosa Ora Pro Nobis. The game of unearned credit is impossible with currency, but it is possible with spirituality. In that sense, You're right. 21st century reaction. There is nothing free in this world except the grace of God. I believe that's a quote from a Coen Brothers movie, but I believe it's a genuine Christian sentiment, although I think that's a Protestant saying and not a Catholic one. But it's absolutely true. I remember it from the Coen Brothers movie, True Grit, which was obviously a remake of a book in a John Wayne movie. But thank you for the very generous super chat 21st century reaction. Let me check very quickly back on the live stream here and see if Nerve and Maker has given me anything recently. Here we go. So Nerve and clarifies, I'm basically talking about how the man-child has ruined both cartoons and toys for children. These products are no longer made for kids. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I mean, they're super fun for teenager, like young, like preteen kids, and some teenagers. But cartoons in particular, I mean, Steven Universe is a cartoon. Is there any kid that actually watches that and enjoys it? I really like to meet the kid that watches that, because I know a lot of people who love Steven Universe, and they're all women in their late 30s, like my age. They're all women in their late 30s talking about how inclusive and revolutionary it is. I know of no kids who like Steven Universe. I think it's too sort of science fiction-y for the girls, and I think it's too weird and touchy-feely for most guys. And I can't imagine finding Steven Universe a compelling character. He's super whiny, and not even in sort of a fun way. I have to kind of admit, though, that as a young adult, I really liked Adventure Time. And even as an adult appreciator of Adventure Time, I like the idea that it would be something both kids and adults might like. Although, once more, I don't know. Most of the time, I see adults liking Adventure Time and not kids. Yeah, I don't know. What do kids like these days? I see, I mean, I used to make fun of this, like, SpongeBob SquarePants as being sort of the lowest tier kids entertainment. And I said to myself, oh man, like, it was so much better when I was a kid. We had Animaniacs and Tiny Toons and reruns of actual Looney Tunes with all of their racism still intact. Isn't it better than SpongeBob SquarePants? But my God, I mean, SpongeBob SquarePants looks like a masterpiece next to the stuff that's coming out of these kids' entertainment channels. They're not even funny. They're not even exciting. They feel like toy commercials that are extended for an hour. And I'm just getting aware of this again, and it's kind of depressing. There's been a marked decrease in kids' entertainment. Yeah. As usual, I started the stream too late, but let's get back to the entropy chats. Thank you, Alejandro Sakaras. Oh, I've already read that one. Okay. Medwords for $5 USA. Hi, Dave. My Catholic girlfriend of 2 years wants me to convert. I was raised Lutheran, but now I reject Protestantism and interested in Orthodoxy. I think I would be willing to become Eastern Catholic, though. Well, that's a great compromise, because Eastern Catholics are Catholics. So if you like the Eastern liturgy and you want to particularly... There are no cucked versions of Catholicism, because there's only one Catholicism, and Catholicism is doctrinally untouched by the world. I am a believer. However, if you want something that's more liturgically solid, you could do a lot worse than Eastern Rite Catholics or Byzantine Rite Catholics. The services are beautiful. The churches are typically beautiful. The members are more committed. The boomer detachment is much less of a component. It's all around a great option if you have that option available to you. And they're in full communion with the Church of Rome, which eliminates all need for conflict. One disadvantage, though, is that if you move, you're probably going to be SOL. You're probably going to be forced to attend just out of convenience, unfortunately, you'll be forced to attend sort of a Novus Ordo church. Once you have a kid, getting everyone to church and back again is, you don't, sandwiching that in a 2-hour drive is just it's not workable. You end up going to the local church instead. Or at least with my schedule. But yeah, that's a great option. That's, of all the religious questions people have asked me about, converting their spouse or, converting to their spouse's version of Christianity, or sometimes very regrettably not Christianity, this is the easiest one because it's the easiest solution. It's a perfect compromise. Just, you want to do orthodoxy and you don't want to deal with, heresy. The Byzantine Church is right for you. What can I say? The Byzantine Rite, I should say, not the Byzantine Church, because there's only one church. Although, I've been told today that our good friend Ryan Turnipseed got into a bit of a spat on Twitter with the Lutheran Synod's Twitter account, and was subsequently blocked from commenting by making a joke about them selling indulgences as part of a website paywall, which I thought was quite delightful. So maybe Lutheran, maybe Turnipseed himself has found himself in search of a church. If he's been excommunicated from the excommunicants, maybe you can reverse the polarity on that and head back in a direction more aligned with the Tiber River. Just saying, Ryan, if you're watching, just saying it's there. Ben White for $10 USA. In my senior year of university, I wrote a piece on liquidity premium. There is an inherent value in having liquid assets over illiquid ones. Well, certainly. And that's what FTX was saying this month. They were saying that they weren't having a solvency problem, they were having a liquidity problem. And they were looking at people like Binance to bail them out of the liquidity problem. But it turns out that due to the sheer number of shenanigans, you couldn't characterize what they were undergoing as a liquidity problem. It was actually something more equivalent to a solvency problem. Liquid assets are better, especially in a time-sensitive situation. The Fed can provide banks liquidity at low interest rates, but unfortunately for Sam, he does not get the same benefit. Yeah, that's the thing, right? And that's how, unfortunately, Ben White, you have me at a disadvantage because you have caught me at my misunderstanding about how this works. Because I frankly don't understand how FTX is not a bank. I don't understand why it isn't a bank. Because it acts like a bank. It has customer holdings like a bank. It holds, collateral like a bank. And so why isn't it a bank? It doesn't behave like a hedge fund. But to me, when I hear what FTX is doing, it sounds more like a bank than it does like a traditional exchange. And so I'm completely mystified as why it's not regulated like a bank. I guess if it was regulated like a bank, it certainly couldn't do what it did, like having an investment firm essentially, lend it money and then buy its own tokens from it. That doesn't seem like it would be legal, right? Again, I'm talking out of my ass. I have no idea what the law actually is, but there's no way that they're just these glaring holes in the regulation of risk that these connected but unethical people can just walk right through. How is any of this properly managing risk? Again, like a 13-year-old could see the problems in this setup. Having a company that lent you money then buy your own coins back from you and use it as collateral to lend out more money. It's Ouroboros, the company. So the Fed can provide the bank's liquidity at low interest rates, but unfortunately, he does not get the same benefit. God knows why. Apparently, everything has to do just with what we call things these days. You can make any kind of financial shenanigan work just as long as you have the right regulators willing to turn a blind eye to you because you fit in the red column as opposed to the blue column or whatnot. Who knows? It's all complete gibberish at this stage as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm barely literate in terms of statistics and in terms of the language of risk, although not in the language of finance, as you've probably picked up listening to the stream. You should be able to explain this stuff to me and have it make sense to me. Because if I can't understand it, then probably your average regulator is not going to be able to understand it. And if a law can't be understood, it's not a law. If a law can't be understood, it's not a law. Laws have to be generally understandable. Every law in a country not only needs to be understood by the people who are following it, but by everyone else so that they know what the law is. So that when you see somebody who runs a bank, you can say to yourself, oh, I know that he's following the rules for the bank. And, he's insured, but he has to follow X, Y, and Z rule. Once laws become so complicated that nobody understands them, who's outside of the particular domain where that law applies, then all we're dealing with really is hidden sovereignty, dark power, people wielding power over a system that they can almost by definition not be held accountable for. And of course, as the complexity of these laws increases, the ability for procedural manipulation to take the lion's share of what actually, to basically control the lion's share of what goes on in these institutions becomes more and more a reality. And I mean, that's just the problem we're facing at all levels. The collapse of complex societies. Okay. Here's a good question. A question from Paul A. And I thought I alluded to this answer, but I'll say it again. Paul A. for $10 USA asks me, as a Catholic, what is your opinion on usury? I've heard Catholic law considers it taboo. Well, it does. And I mean, we're witnessing why it's a taboo. I mean, this is why usury is wrong. I mean, usury is the idea that you're making money off of money and providing no value for your service. Now, I don't know how a Catholic social justice is supposed to deal with this, because the problem is that, okay, one way of getting rid of usury is to blanket ban all loans for interest, the way the medieval church essentially did, with some loopholes for traders and merchant classes of a non-Christian variety, shall we say. You can lend at no interest rates, basically, but no lending at interest rates whatsoever. The problem with this is that this essentially means that there are going to be no loans in between strangers, and because there's always a possibility that the money is lost. There could be catastrophic circumstances that cause you to lose your money, and this means that your society operates at zero. It basically has a liquidity crisis for all young people, because young people don't have money and they can't actually take risks. And so your society becomes completely stagnant and can't actually develop things or pool resources. For myself, the way I define usury is every time you make money from an investment, there should be value you can talk about providing. Are you providing value in terms of time? If you're providing value in terms of time, nobody should make more money from an investment than a bank gives you as interest for a savings account. Basically, that's it. If all you're doing is sort of being the person with the money who's there to spot a certain transaction and make it and grease the wheels, so to speak, not in a corrupt sense, but in a liquidity sense, then you should make the interest rate that corresponds to like the standard interest rate for a savings account of a sufficient size. However, if you're managing risk, if another service you could provide, I should say, is that you're a risk manager. You know how to arrange aggregate portfolios so as to shield yourself from risk. And so the service you're selling to people is your financial acumen and your math skills, and maybe some of your instinct, like Jeremy Irons from Margin Call, and maybe some of your tolerance for risk, just generally. And you're actually going to take a hit if you go bankrupt, unlike the people who are bailed out. That is, you can get paid a premium for that as well. The problem is that once we have people in the society where they're just making money because they have money, it goes into a mutual fund, it goes into the financial firm they're managing, and they don't take any risk because they get bailouts, and they're not managing risk because obviously they weren't managing risk properly in the financial crisis of 2008, because all of their risks were correlated, and because they were trying to hide the fact that you can't just issue an indefinite number of home loans out to people who have bad credit practices and then hide that risk from people through derivatives. That's not a legitimate thing. They were wrong about that, so they did not manage risk correctly. And that they still made money. That's usury. Making money where your investments to sit back and they make you money because you have money, and they're making you significantly more money than a savings account would. That's usury, because you're exploiting the system, you're making money without providing value, and that money, in my opinion, rightfully belongs to the poor. It rightfully belongs to society in general, and I don't know what the right way to deal with this is. Some amount of legalizing financial shenanigans like the variety we saw at FTX, or heavily taxing gains above a certain threshold might be a start. I don't trust our current oligarchs to manage the money any more astutely, but perhaps somebody who didn't have as many perverse incentives would do a better job. Again, Paul A., my definition of usury is making money off of money that does not correspond to providing a less tangible service like risk management, time, or liquidity support, so to speak. And if a society should try to quantify that, and it should try to tamp down on people making money off of shenanigans. People should be able to know what service they're providing in exchange for the volumes of money that they're earning, in my honest opinion. Okay, let's check on stream health here. Okay, I'm doing pretty good here. All right. I lost my place again. All right. Mim the Dwarf for $5 USA. Speaking of sci-fi, I must recommend Ad Astra. Very underrated modern film. It's Heart of Darkness, a journey that hints at the futility of mankind looking to space travel for meaning and existential answers. I hope you're all well. God bless. Yeah, I did think that I didn't actually see Ad Astra. The way people described it, it reminded me of another super-based sci-fi novel called The Forever War, which I haven't read since high school, but thinking back to it, it's incredibly reactionary. And an incredibly reactionary, almost Landian perspective on technological development. And I really, really want to get a copy and reread The Forever War when I get the chance. I heard great things about Ad Astra, but when my skepticism at watching it, Mim the Dwarf, is this. I mean, a great example of a movie I saw, and I've been thinking about this movie a lot for the last 6 months, since it's the last movie I saw in theaters, period. The last movie I saw in theaters was The Northman. And it was a good movie in the sense that there was nothing wrong with it. It didn't have a historical casting. It had great cinematography. It was emotionally jarring. It got me involved in the plot. It also didn't really have much of a soul. And the first problem is, again, I guess maybe the problem is that the director did not believe in the director did not believe in the world he was depicting. He was depicting a world where honor and brutal contests between men were primary, and family actually, and life itself was very much secondary. And because of that, the director is right. The director and the writer, they're writing scripts for characters that are like aliens. They don't have human emotions, and they don't behave like humans. They behave like animals. And was that the point? Was the point of the Northmen that these people that lived in pagan societies or were effectively just animals? Like, they didn't have spirits or souls the way we understand them, or their souls were so paganistic that we can't relate to them. There was a point in the Northmen where I feel like they missed a big opportunity. The Northmen either should have been a redemption arc where the person bent on revenge is redeemed by love to a woman, or it should be a Greek tragedy where he sacrifices love of the woman and murders his own family for the futility of revenge. And in that case, the futility of the revenge should be highlighted. But the problem was, and I guess, ultimately you could say they went with the tragedy angle. But the problem was that there was no chemistry in the romance. And so it was impossible to feel that there was something at stake. And it wasn't clear that the revenge sought was ultimately futile. It was implied, in fact, that there was some meaning to it, which all that sort of highlighted to a viewer like myself was that, because in my mind, how I read the actual events was that the revenge was absolutely futile. And it sacrificed good things for pointless things, meaningless things. There is a case for justice. There's a case for controlled, I don't want to say vengeance, but controlled retribution, let's say, in my worldview. But what was depicted in that movie was not controlled retribution, and it certainly was not justice. It was vengeance and wrath, and it was chaotic. And it showed that, but the movie didn't recognize that as evil. And so since it couldn't recognize the good of family and the good of love and even the good of valorous battle, the characters were fighting over principles that the director didn't hold. And it, like I said before, it was like watching animals fight over a piece of meat at the zoo. It was a conflict that existed over stakes that were alien from the audience and alienated through a movie creators that didn't understand any part of the story itself. And I would be afraid of that with Ad Astra. I doubt that, maybe Ad Astra hints at sort of a larger baseness, but you can't understand the horror of Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now without believing in civilization. The whole point of Kurtz and Marlowe's interaction is that Kurtz proves the futility of civilization itself. And in the movie Apocalypse Now, Kurtz proves the futility of America itself in the jungles of Southeast Asia. The protagonist, was it played by not Charlie Sheen, his father, Martin Sheen, I think. The protagonist meets essentially the futility of the American vision itself. And, this is a monster, I think, that we've met in the 21st century. That's emerging every day. We see Kurtz emerge from the jungle to declare civilization essentially kaput. But I don't trust Hollywood to have recognized that, because Hollywood is going to be the last people who understand that this is going on. They're going to be the last people who pick up on this development. They didn't understand what COVID meant. They didn't understand what 2016 meant. They didn't understand what January 6th meant. And They don't understand what the Ukrainian war against Russia meant either. And so I just have a huge amount of skepticism that I'm going to get some kind of message from a movie like that. Iron Duke for $5 USA. Dave, do you agree our so-called elites want the majority of us to become 21st century serfs? Well, yeah, Iron Duke, it's worse than that. 21st century serfs were needed to work the land. And they also weren't really, other than Viking raiders, a la the Northmen, serfs were largely not interfered with by lords. What they want us for is a far more nefarious end. They want a humanity that is just going to sit back, consume drugs, either of a physical or digital variety, and vote for them and validate their rulership over the West. That's what they want to exist in the 21st century. That's way worse than being a serf, because eventually they'll realize, to the extent that they pull off this concoction, that the only reason why they're beating these people is to essentially validate the system, which they can do by faking it. I'm not saying that they faked the validity of the government so far. I would never say that, Susan. But in the event that people are characterized only by their ability to pull a lever and comply with government edicts, and other than that, their entire life is just consuming drugs of one variety or another, and having meaningless sexual encounters that don't have any permanence to them, at that point, you're in the matrix and you're completely disposable. And you're in fact, you're way more disposable than the people who are actually in the Matrix, in the movie The Matrix. So there's that. Thank you, though, for the super chat. I'm going to go on a little bit faster since I'm at the 11 o'clock mark. Ben White for $5 USA. Caroline has a Twitter post complaining how stupid and dull life was without amphetamine usage. Well, doesn't that just say it all? Yeah, I mean, all of these guys, they're all on antidepressants. They're all on like these Adderall type drugs that help them focus. These people are not well, and they're very sick people, and they're so delusional too. It's really quite sad. She mentioned, that is, Caroline mentioned, how dumb it was that 20% of the brain is used to think about food. People like her not only reject reality, but actively fight against it. Yeah, and these people, I mean, does she think that, what does she think she's doing? Taking amphetamines? I mean, does she think she's becoming like Powder from that 1990s movie of the same name, Powder, where the guy can use 100% of his brain power, so to speak, and he's like shooting lightning out of his eyes or whatever? Does she think she's going to become, laser-eyed, giga-brain person? I mean, the woman, by her own admission, isn't doing anything beyond elementary school math. This doesn't require amphetamines. And I know mathematicians in the past have been known to use amphetamines to boost performance. But it's, this is, I mean, she's not, I mean, she's not like, she's not trying to solve Fermat's last conjecture here. She's not trying to come up with some complicated proof of the four-color theorem. She's doing Excel math and dressing it up like she's a genius because she's sitting on top of $1 billion that are making money because it's $1 billion invested into a market that naturally makes money on money. And the rest of the stuff is bullshit. She's destroying her body. And she's destroying her future. And all of this stuff about big brain drug users and polyamorous lean-in girl bossism is a total cope. I don't know. I mean, there's been so many. I should know a lot of girl bosses, and with a few exceptions, there are very few real ones. There are very few people of this description that are just so into leaning into these mindless corporate jobs and destroying their bodies and souls for the purpose of making the line go up. I don't see this. I mean, I'm sure it's true for somebody. I'm sure it's true for well, I don't know. I mean, did Sheryl Sandberg really did it even work for her? I mean, how much did she really need to lean in to get into her position, and how much of Sheryl Sandberg's position was her familial relations with Mark Zuckerberg? Right? All right, Takar for $3 USA. Hi, Dave. That's a question. I need to double click it. Irritating. It's like cross cheddar, weirdly enough. Let me just sorry about that. I needed to car for $5 USA. Hi Dave, do you think the investors were in on it? Hard for me to believe they were not alarmed by all of the red flags. Well, this is the thing is, and some of them probably were. And we're never going to get to the bottom of all of this, because a very real possibility is that this is all a giant money laundering scheme for various democratic causes. The causes like Black Lives Matter and other government projects need a way to get the money back into the coffers of the Democratic Party. And so what they do is they send it out. They give it to certain governmental organizations. Those government organizations need to be solvent, so they buy into funds that have a guaranteed they have a guaranteed profit with very, very little risk. And these hedge funds are the perfect avenue for that. And then these hedge funds end up giving it back to the Democratic Party. It's a perfect loop, right? So a lot of these investors, like the Clinton Foundation, this could be an entire scheme to launder money through the idea that they're just investing in it. But I think a lot of the people who lost money are just honest to God investors that were trying to find a way to hedge against the US dollar inflating. And they're going to take a giant haircut. They're going to have lost all their money because it was basically robbed from them. I won't mince words about that at all. Okay, PBK. Hi Dave, here's 10 loonies for the great monologue against the fake and gay. I know my hyphenated name is a bit cringe, but at least I don't go by PBK IRL. BTW, the Sildings talk was great. Well, thank you very much. I am a little proud of the Sildings talk. I thought that was a fairly good essay. Man, I really wish I could write more video essays. My time isn't what it used to be. It isn't what it used to be. Maybe I should do these things like every other week, so I can work on essays more. But I doubt I would. I probably would just sleep more, right? and the thing is with these essays is that for most of sort of my thoughts on current events, if you wait a week, it's not fresh in your mind. And the longer you wait to make videos, the harder it is to make them, because you're going not from what's in your mind, but from notes. And it's infinitely harder to make a video from notes than it is just, spitting it into a microphone from right off the top of your head. Okay, rotten meat for $3. Private property has been a disaster for ownership. I might agree with that. You're coming very close to the distributist formulation that capitalism is a crime against ownership. Ownership is the ultimate ownership, and there's two meanings of the word ownership. The first meaning of the word ownership is that I can dispose of this thing at my will. This thing is my toy. The other ownership is sort of moral ownership, the ownership that you learn in the military. It's I'm going to take like, this thing is mine, and if it fails, it's my fault. This family is mine, and I own the fact that it thrives. This outcome is something that, like, is important to me because I own its outcome. And that, the second type of ownership is what we're really lacking in the modern world. Sam Bankman-Fried, he owned everything, but he owned nothing. He didn't even own his own relationships. He didn't even own the money he made when he had $30 billion. He had $30 billion, and he didn't own in the right way, he didn't own in the real way, a red cent of it. It was all just ephemeral toys that he could and did dispose of. The problem, though, is that no one has discovered a better way other than private property for people to take ownership over certain material things that people have to take ownership of in the real world. Obviously, private property does not work for government, which is why people toy with the idea of monarchy or other ways that you could get leaders to actually have skin in the game when it comes to political decision making. But when it comes to small things like houses and cars and bicycles and Warhammer 40k miniatures, ownership in terms of private property has been the only way to resolve these issues that's been at all fair. Obviously, ownership gets more and more perverse as the numbers involved get bigger than the human mind can process properly, and we essentially create sub-sovereigns without proper responsibility, without proper real ownership of the decisions being made, like in the case of Bill Gates, I would argue. But, for every Bill Gates who got so rich that he got so much private property that he no longer owned anything, for every one of the people like that who actually got his fortune by making, I guess, physical things, software, in our modern world, for every one of that guy, there are 10 people who make money just off of money itself, like our friend SBF here, in our cautionary tale. So in my very Catholic imagination, there's a lot of things wrong with private property. It's the best we can do, but the big villain in the room, the one that needs to be taken on directly, is usury. It's the banks. The banks are the problem. Individual millionaires, individual billionaires like Zuckerberg and Gates and Bezos, they're also problems, but in my mind, they're a secondary problem. And they're a problem that needs to be dealt with acutely. Whereas banks and our modern day banking system needs to be dealt with generally. It needs to be dealt with across the board. There cannot be holes in our system like this where people just make money and don't generate value and rise to the top of our society with having no ownership in anything inside of our society. If we allow that to happen, we will be ruled by bugmen not until the sun consumes the earth, because we will certainly destroy ourselves before that time, until civilization collapses down to the most basic level. I'll say that. Okay, next chat. Torin McCabe for $5 USA. You are a man of the right. You as a man of the right care about absolute and fundamental value and meaning. The left cares more about being relatively better than Republicans. So based on their metric status value systems, they are still succeeding. Well, I mean, do they care about having more power than the Republicans? Do they care about being better than the Republicans in a moral sense? Glenn Greenwald has really pointed this out to me recently. But there are very few, like, moderate progressive principles, other than the sex stuff, that have been consistent principles that progressives have stuck with. Other than orgasms and orgasm-related things, modern-day center-leftists of the Democrat variety have betrayed all of what were previously considered core values, like peace, like humanitarian stewardship, like populism, like caring about what the little guy thought, like free speech, like freedom of religion, like general tolerance of ethnicities you don't like. They've tossed all of these principles under the wayside when it came to challenges to their actual power. And yeah, I guess, I mean, they care about having relatively more power than Republicans. And congratulations, because of the election, they do have relatively more power than the Republicans. They won. Yeah, I mean, the GAE rules the world, and they have very few people that can contend with them in a realistic way. Yeah, I guess I agree with that, Torin McCabe. I don't have anything more to say. All right, Joey for $5 USA. Once a midwit, always a midwit. Is it possible to break the shackles of midwittery? Thanks for your work, Dave. Well, I mean, I'm a former Reddit atheist. Midwittery is not an IQ level, guys. Midwittery is a certain lack of curiosity. Like Ben Burgess, for instance. Ben is probably has, well, I don't know about that, but well, who knows? Ben might have a higher IQ than I do. Maybe he probably has a higher IQ than I do. He certainly comes from a demographic group that has a statistical averagely higher IQ than my demographic group does. And that's one assertion of human biodiversity that I can get away with saying on YouTube, as long as as long as his group wins out, you can get away with saying that. So in all likelihood, he has a higher IQ than I do. But Ben Burgess, with his higher IQ, is a midwit, and I'm not, in my honest opinion, because Ben Burgess doesn't use the intelligence that's given to him for purposes of curiosity. He uses it for purposes of status signaling. The reason why that IQ chart is correct, where the grug brain and the genius have the same answer and the midwit has a different one, is that midwits use their intelligence to signal that they're smart, whereas grug brains and genuine geniuses approach things in the mode of question and answer. That's my advice for people intellectually, is just be very clear with yourself, the questions you're asking and answering. Self-deception is always a huge problem for humanity. There's nothing I can do to stop that. And I acknowledge this, even in my own religious points of view. At a certain point, the Catholic Church just has a huge Bayesian prior behind it. And, do I critically examine every element of it in a totally rationalistic sense? No. And I'm aware of that. But I think I can avoid this to a certain extent by always trying to suss out sincere questions and process them. Now, I mean, currently, I think we are really suffering from this on the right, especially in the academic agent versus Anglo-Ortho conflict that you see if you follow either Anglo-Ortho or academic agent. They're having a argument right now, that's taken up 4 hours of actual video time, or probably 12 hours if you conjoin all of the videos together. And in my opinion, this argument is 100% a linguistic construction of exaggerated statements. There is no Socratic process of sincere questions that could generate this. Now, I happen to believe that both academic agent and Anglo-Ortho, these are both genuinely curious individuals. So whatever their IQ is, they're not midwits. But they're engaging in a medium where their natural curiosity to determine where their difference is obscured by social media's incentive to constantly be signaling in these very cute ways, in these very ostentatious ways, where you have to make these overstatements and these signals, and it's not about the question or about nuance. It's about being on a side, like one side versus the other. Are you on Anglo-Ortho side or are you academic agent side? I have not encountered a single question where they disagree, where further questions cannot elucidate a position that's obviously the best of both worlds, so to speak. This is also the problem with my conflicts with the neo-pagans. This is a sincere conversation in the fact that I want to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that the emotions felt by the neo-pagans are real and sincere. Like their religious emotions are real and sincere, and their religious objections to Christianity are real and sincere. The most prominent one being that Christian leaders in the last 100 years have totally betrayed, I would say, humanity generally, and their spiritual callings generally, but not to put too fine a point on it. In particular, they betrayed the West and Western Christendom. And that's a reality, and I appreciate the emotion with which that question has begun. The problem is that I cannot resurrect a coherent worldview from emotions. There has to be more work done to make this an actual critique that makes sense. There has to be some other worldview on the other side of this exchange, and not just emotions. And I can't engage sincerely with that dialectic publicly without having sort of the other person on the other side of that. And I don't want to get into a position where, we have this conversation and then everyone else on that side denounces the person who just had the conversation with me as being not real or whatever. That would be futile. So to not be a midwit, just have your intellectual process driven by genuine curiosity. Nobody is a midwit about the things they truly love. That's my inversion of the Conquest 3 laws. You can't be a midwit if you really love Warhammer miniatures or Magic the Gathering or violin or banjo or classical music. You can suck at playing the violin and you're still not a midwit, because if you sincerely try to play for the love of the instrument itself, then you're not a midwit. And that's the most important thing in my opinion. Okay. Joey for $5 USA. What? Wait, no, that's the one I just read. My apologies, guys. Sam153 for $10 USA. This stream cut to the heart of the nonsense of our current world economy. Are there any industrialists left like Henry Ford? It seems we're far away from that. Well, I mean, Elon Musk is kind of like that. I mean, Elon Musk builds actual things in the real world. I use build very loosely because I think Elon Musk is much less connected to the production of those things than Henry Ford is, but he is a little bit. Elon Musk is an actual executive of the old school, even though, like all things in the modern world, he's kind of like a miniature diet version of that, right? I'm sort of a miniature diet version of my parents' generation too. I feel like we're an entire generation of mini-me's, the millennials. SBF is a mini-me version of like Bill Gates, of the financial whiz kids of the 1980s, of the Wolves of Wall Street people. We're all kind of in the shadow, but the best we can do is sort of try to occupy the things we're called to as sincerely as possible. So that's my best answer, but thank you for the super chat. Takar for $3, and it is a question, so it needs a double click. Takar for $10 or $3. It never shows up properly. Hi, Dave. I'm a non-Bugman software nerd. What do you think are the best companies or sectors to work for? It seems so many companies are in the Bugman enabling usury quantification game. Well, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, I work for a company that does sort of contract work. So I do all sorts of stuff inside my domain of expertise. So I don't know. I mean, you're kind of, as a craftsman, you are kind of selling your labor to the highest bidder. And I'll say this. So who knows 99% of the software that's being developed in the modern world, let's be honest, it's kind of trash. It might make a few systems more efficient in the medical industry or in like the aeronautics industry. It might help categorize some genetic samples to actually save lives if you're really lucky. But for the most part, what's being developed in terms of software are apps and video games and these financial shenanigans that are going to do more harm than good. And there's nothing we really can do to control this, because the machine algorithm you develop one day for good is going to be used the next day in terms for potentially bad ends. The way I would look at this as a programmer is programming is an art. And if you can develop yourself as an artist, if you can develop yourself as somebody who teaches programming and develops programming and is capable of imparting a love and a vigor for programming and a rigor for programming to the other people around you, that's your real contribution for the most part. Because when good governance eventually comes into being, when our age finally draws to a close, when new religion is discovered, probably after the collapse, to be honest, there's going to be this hole for people to sort of rediscover the love of the technical. And there's going to be a need to sort of unravel and rediscover ethical programming from an actual human point of view that actually encourages human psychological health. And people will need to remember the art of programming. People will need to remember the quality of programming. And hell, people will need to see quality programming bases like the Linux kernel in existence, handed down for them through whatever means that's possible. So I would really take pleasure and spiritual succor in the small things rather than demanding that your software be put to good use, because I don't think we really can control that. At this point, you're like a soldier in an army, and I'm going to sort of repeat where I think Christianity and Nietzsche intersect. I think that especially when it comes to militaries, there is no such thing as an honorable soldier who conducts himself honorably that is bad or not worthy of our respect. Even if he fought for the bad side of the war, even if the king he fought for, the side he fought for, was evil. Like I said, my family suffered at the hands of the Red Army, but every single member of the Red Army who valiantly charged at German machine guns nests at the Battle of Stalingrad is a hero. And if you take down statues of the Red Army because of Stalin or whatever, or ma ethnic cleansing of Germans out of Eastern Europe, I mean, that's an evil act because you're robbing the glory of people that were good. And I feel the same thing about other professions. If you can fulfill your vocation as an art, then, obviously there are limits to it. Like you can't directly do evil with your software, but I wouldn't worry about, I think that you're sort of morally preserved from the downstream effects of that software, like 2 or 3 rungs down the ladder. In the same ways that I believe just as a soldier, you're not on the line for the cruel intentions of the king who's commanding your army. Although maybe a Catholic moralist could correct me on that front. I think that is the correct answer. Takar, thank you. Dave, your commentary is always insightful. Well, thank you, Takar. Again. All right, guys. Last half an hour, we're going to have to wrap up the super chats. But thank you in advance. So will Acolyte for $5 USA. Okay, one thing I really got from Adam and Setches, they made the joke about Soul Man for Thomas Sowell, like, I'm a soul man. And that every time I hear Thomas Sowell, I think I hear it to the lyrics of Soul Man, I'm a soul man. But this person's not only a soul man, he's a soul acolyte. Perhaps he has a Sowell sister. Hey Dave, really appreciated the stream. Not sure if you discovered your thoughts on Kanye yet. Dave Chappelle had a monologue recently where he joked, "It's not crazy to think what Kanye thinks. It's just crazy to say it out loud." Yeah, that's a great. Dave Chappelle really threaded the needle on the whole Kanye West thing. He said exactly what everyone's thinking, but he said it in a way that it was very difficult to cancel him for saying it. And so I'm really, really grateful of that. There have been a few formulations that have come out of this ADL. The ADL's just been spurging out in the last month, like a bunch of petulant children. And they've really, as Morgoth has pointed out, they have really exposed themselves for being, it used to be they were seen as sort of managers, as protectors even. And everyone, I have no problem with the Hebrew people. I hope they thrive just as I hope every other people thrives. I don't want war with these people. And I don't think anyone should want war with any other people. And it used to be that you respected the ADL because when they pointed out that you were doing something wrong, you're like, oh my God. And like, I don't want to hurt people. And it looks like I insulted, the Jewish people, and out of respect for them, I want to apologize. But in the last 2 months, that switched from being, I better not say that, not because I don't want to insult a Jewish person, but because the ADL will destroy me. And I know, my Jewish audience members, they can't control this, but all I'm doing is pointing out a red flag because your protections have moved from being moral protections to being protections of fear. And the protections of fear don't last. And when the protections based on fear fall, that's a scary position to be in. I wouldn't want to be in that position. I hope it works out for both of our peoples, but, I don't envy that position you're in. But Dave Chappelle he really threaded the needle with it's not crazy to think what Kanye West thinks. It's just crazy to say it out loud. Yeah, that's true. I also heard the formulation, anti-Semitism used to mean you hated Jews, and now it means that Jews hate you, which is the Twitter formulation that I've seen circulated in right-wing circles recently as well. And you're going to see more of these sort of challenging but not technically anti-Semitic formulations. These will grow in prominence in the next year or two. And that will be a reality. And they're not going to come from my community. They're going to come from, people like Kanye West and Dave Chappelle. A lot of other non-white, non-indigenously European groups are going to say these things as well. And I don't know the answers to those questions, and it's not really my job to answer those questions either. I wish people the best, and I really hope that we can avoid any conflict. All right. Thank you very much, Soul Alkalite. Creeper Weirdo for... Why is this not pinning? Because, of course, things don't pin. Okay, I'll just read it before it disappears and I click the wrong button. Creeper Weirdo for $10 USA. Honest question. Why aren't there more conversations around art and what we should be consuming? I know the distant right is more about hierarchy and politics, but I think with the rise of the Iron Age of media, we have a lot to say and contribute. Okay, well, I'll kind of give you the rundown here. There are publishing houses like Imperium Books that I highly recommend. There are fiction writers like Zero H.P. Lovecraft and the Passage Prize. There are art creators like Geo from Content Minded Podcast. Or Sun Given. These people are creating art, and there are more and more of these people every day that are creating art. I can highlight them. I'm not going to advocate anything that I haven't myself read or consumed. I don't, and I hate to say this, I don't do fiction via audio. Fiction via audio is way too brain consuming, and I know I'm going back on this. I a lot of times I listen to audio when I'm driving or doing chores. It's a multitasking thing for me, and listening to a fiction rendition via audio just does not work for me. But I would love to. At least I forget it. The Franklin's audiobook, or soon to be textbook, hopefully, The Words of NC, which I got through the first few chapters of, is very good from what I've read, and you should check it out on his channel. Where was I? The problem with me talking about art on this stream is I'm not going to recommend anything I haven't read. Period. I do know I owe people to read The Three Body Problem. That's on my list. I'll get around to it. I need to find someone has an audiobook account. Well, no, sorry, it's fiction. I'm obviously not going to listen to it on audiobook. So I probably should just bite the bullet and buy the actual book. But anyway, the reason why, so I did a huge video about creating art on the right called, I forget what the video is actually called, but it was about creating shared universes. It was a Substack essay and a video, and it was very, very time consuming to produce. The problem is that you can't, and I really do believe I said everything there about like innovative ideas about how you could produce art and how you could organize it. I feel that the essay was a very limited use to people. I did not have the bandwidth to organize a collective creative fiction project myself. And the other thing is that the more fictional endeavors become collaborative, the harder they get. Just as the longer you take to make a video after thinking of the idea, the harder it is to get. The more authors you have, the more exponentially difficult the process is of creating shared product. So people just need to make it and publish it rather than talk about it. I have not come up with a compelling way to talk about art in the abstract beyond what I wrote in that Substack essay like a year ago. So that's my honest take, Creeper Weirdo. And I'm going to move on to the next one. Caleb R. for... Always with this pinning system. Caleb R. for $5 USA. Did you watch Under the Microscope stream AA did on Anglo-Ortho? If so, what did you think of AA's critique of Anglo-Ortho? Well, I mean, it's like 4 hours, and I mean, I already said what I thought of this. Their argument is entirely linguistic. They're both right in different capacities. The boomer truth regime is dead, and we're lying to young people if we tell them that you just have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and this is all about the individual, and the government doesn't matter, and we just have to keep our ear to the grindstone, our eyes on the prize, and carry on forward, Christian soldier. Look. That cannot be the extent of our language and message to young people, because it's obviously not the entirety of the truth. It is absolutely not the case that pure moralism in an individual sense is going to win the day. But Anglo-Ortho is right when he says that politics ultimately is the secondary part of the equation for everyone here. The biggest issue is making sure that your lives are healthy spiritually, physically, and socially. And everyone watching this, everyone on the distant right, needs to make that their number one priority, and not coming to the properly based worldviews. I mean, it really comes to a head in, like I said before, my arguments with the pickup artist community or the right-wing pickup artists have kind of been telling about this, where like I've literally witnessed them give like terrible advice to people, because in the moment the terrible advice seemed like the based advice, and because like telling people to do productive things or to live with certain constraints on their behavior sounded like you were kind of giving in to the man. The base take seemed like it was more edgy, but it was absolutely destructive. And people who follow this advice they're gonna get BTFO'd in their own lives. They're gonna end up being sort of self-pitying people with no ability to manage their own lives because they're 100% focused on politics and rejecting a system that's unfair. The system is unfair. We have to deal with that. And we have to emotionally prepare ourselves for dealing with an unfair system. But that's not a get out of, like, that doesn't get you out of questions of personal morality. It doesn't. And like, so with that nuance, I bet that's both people. I bet that is both the way I said it just there. I bet both Anglo Ortho and the academic agent would agree with that 100%. And we can neither ignore the political nor confuse the moral. And people constantly use appeals to political reality as excuses to get themselves around moral imperatives. And people often use moral imperatives to disguise political cowardice. I hold on, obviously I'm more on Anglo-Ortho's side of this than I am on AA's, especially because AA is trying to incorporate this into a broader sort of postmodern right-wing turn. Certain elements of postmodernism I can get behind in terms of the fact that we understand a certain amount of anti-human universalism, general universalism, like spiritual universalism, I'm 100% on board with. But I'm with postmodernism and its general skepticism towards progress. But his anti-teleological bent is just a complete red herring. It's going to go nowhere for the purposes I talk about all the time on this stream. So I'm obviously more on Anglo-Ortho's side of this equation. But, and this is why I feel like a fence sitter on this. And I'm not. I'm just nuanced. I can't tell you how many clergy and religious leaders from mainline denominations use, like, whenever they have a thorny political issue, whenever they need to stand up for their people, whenever they need to say, we're Catholics, we believe this, and we have the right to enforce this moral in our own communities, they bend a knee to power. And, hey, sure, sometimes, like, I'm a coward too, right? I'm a huge coward. My entire life was bending my knee to power, and the only time that I actually speak out, I do so under a pseudonym online. Like, I'm a complete coward in that regard. So I'm one to speak, and so we have to be forgiving with cowardice. But young Christians will be very, very aware of this. Is that when the leadership does display an obvious act of craven submission to the powers that be, when anyone points out that this is a retreat or an act of cowardice, even when they do it tactfully, the leaders cover their own asses by pointing a finger and saying, like, well, you need to work on your own spirituality. When was the last time you prayed? Have you said your rosary? And like all of these, like they try to cover up the macrocosmic problem by sort of humiliating the people bringing the question to the floor with sort of, are you perfect? Have you done everything? Have you eaten your vegetables? And this is a cover, and we can't pretend that the sides of this that this doesn't exist in a mode of balance. That there is not a right pathway through this conundrum. It's both and, obviously. Okay. Thank you very much, Caleb. And I'm going to go on to the next one. Antimatter Bone Crusher for $5. The 13th Floor was another good 90s sci-fi. Yeah, that's a good one too. The 13th Floor. Yeah. Oh man, that was a long time ago. I always confuse that with Altered States. It's one of those. Yeah, it's a weird one. Another decent one that preceded The Matrix. Well, thank you for the recommendation. The 13th Floor, definitely a classic. I mean, I always say these things are good, but I honestly wonder if they hold up. Like one of the movies I liked from the 90s was The Arrival. It's like this low-budget sci-fi movie called The Arrival. Another one was Cube. It's sort of a bottle. It's like a single room sci-fi movie. So it's very low budget. And I rewatched both The Arrival and Cube, and man, they didn't really hold up very well. One that I did think held up relatively well was 12 Monkeys, which is a remake of the French movie La Jetée, or the Jet Strip. And I thought that one, I mean, it's Terry Gilliam, so his cinematography. Terry Gilliam always has this really weird flow in his movies that the plot seems like it moves at this really awkward pacing, and important plot points are glossed over towards the end of the film. But it is always an entertaining watch, and 12 Monkeys holds up. So I think I remember liking 13th Floor, and so I'll recommend it too. Thank you, Antimatter Bone Crusher, but don't come after me if you watch it doesn't hold up like it used to. Tildo Yagin for $10 USA. Hey Dave, another question regarding media. Have you ever played Disco Elysium? If you have, what do you think of it? I found that while being developed by an outspoken communist, I had a lot to say about neo-reactionary and anti-moderate and anti-liberal perspectives. If you haven't played it, NW. What? Do you mean never mind? Well, I haven't played Disco Elysium. Let me look it up. It's a video game, I take it? Like, I hate to say this, guys. I don't play video games. I used to. Oh, okay. I recognize the art on this was used in memes, right? Well, yeah, I mean, this definitely looks modern. The last video game I played was BioShock Infinite. And before that, the last video game I played was Fallout New Vegas. And that was really the end of my video game playing career. I sometimes play video games that are like board games, like, you know, Carcassonne or sometimes Magic the Gathering on the computer, right? But I don't consider those video games because they're just, you know, they're card games that are the computers. You're playing someone else with the computer as an intermediary. I'm sorry, I don't really have a lot to say about Disco Elysium. Look, I'll say this, Tildo Yagin. Don't make that much, especially with communists, because communists are closer to us than our shitlibs. Because communists, the reason why they're communist is not because they read, I mean, I have Karl Marx's Das Kapital behind me on the shelf below me. And I mean, like, for a generation that is, you know, of Zoomers and millennials that's characterized by low attention span, I can pretty much guarantee you the number of people who have read through 3 volumes of Das Kapital are minuscule. That book is first of all, it's old, it's archaic economics that's no longer really what anyone believes. It would be like reading Ptolemy's astrology from ancient times. It's completely archaic. It's completely flat Earth style geography. And I appreciate it for what it was in the 19th century, but it doesn't hold up in that dimension. It's also incredibly dry. Nobody became a communist because they read Das Kapital by Marx. They're communists because they, like us, realize that the progressive shitlibs and the Democrats are hollow and soulless and their worldview is going absolutely nowhere. That revelation is worth more than them having backwards ideas about economics. And to be honest, once they start hitting their 30s and 40s, and especially if they have families, they will eventually discard any meaningful representation of their egalitarian value system, because egalitarian values make absolutely no sense. So I wouldn't be surprised to see really good art coming from communities of communists. I wouldn't make that much of it. If you can come up with a reactionary interpretation of a leftist video game, dude, the author is dead. The author has been dead since Derrida. Just declare death of the author and interpret the text as what the text is saying and not what the commentary says afterwards. My favorite example of this is Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which I would argue has numerous reactionary themes inside of it. The author will deny these themes. He'll deny there's a few themes that are very much transphobic by modern day standards. They deny these, and Neil Gaiman would deny that theme in Sandman, but it's there. And the text itself doesn't make sense without it. And so, don't put too much emphasis on the politics of the creators. Look instead for the substance of the creation. Moving on, Juan Carragon for $5 USA. He says, "Good afternoon, sir. I was the Xinhal Revolution, and by extension, Dr. Yat-sen, based to, should one wash one's chicken before seasoning and cooking? I don't know why, but it feels Lindy. The Xinhal Revolution." Let me check this. People will forgive me. Oh, the 1911 Revolution. Okay. This is of course, this is the Nationalist Revolution. This is the revolution that put in place people like, eventually Shanghai Shek, right, in China. It's also, I believe, that revolution. Is this what you're referring to when you say? Is this what you're euphemistically are referring to when you say wash one's chicken before seasoning and cooking? Do you mean the very famous practice that came out of this period of death by 1,000 cuts, which is a torturous way of executing traitors where you inflict tiny wounds on them very, very painfully until they eventually expire? I don't know why it feels Lindy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what emerged out of the anti-imperial revolution of the early 20th century was a period of incredible instability for China, an incredibly low standard of living. So, there's this the mother of Sam Bankman-Fried was a person in charge of this think tank called Mind the Gap. And about 10 years ago, they put out all these graphs of global development. And I remember a progressive arguing with me that Mao actually was a big humanitarian because when he came to power, life standards in China actually went up. Even in spite of like the Great Leap Forward and, later the Cultural Revolution and all of the murders he accomplished, living standards went up because the war was over. Because the huge period of instability that had gripped most of China itself had eventually evaporated and consolidated order of government had come into being. I don't see the period, just on the numbers. I don't think Mind the Gap was lying about that. The period between 1911 and 1947 was a low point for China as far as I can figure. And it wasn't just because the Japanese had invaded certain areas of it. It was because the country was very, very much mismanaged and very weakly managed too. So I don't see very much to admire here, unfortunately. Juan. But thank you for the super chat. More super chats. Darth Calhoun for $3. Would getting rid of usury entail nationalization of banks and their loans and implementing the Walter Frank-like financial and economic laws, including state-backed home mortgage loans? Well, I mean, I personally believe that any proper government change is going to have to just immediately nationalize the banks. I don't think that they should be permanently nationalized. I think they should be nationalized and reorganized. All of their management has to go, and they have to be sold to new management that will operate those banks under new rules of lending. We cannot keep the financial system intact in the way that it's operating currently. And furthermore, the way that banks have been set up currently, that can't even function if the Federal Reserve were to go away. If the Federal Reserve were to go away, I don't know this to be the case, but given how thoroughly these banks rely on low interest rates, I wouldn't be surprised if a number of them just went belly up instantly. I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of these investment banks in particular just couldn't hack it without money being essentially inflated year over year through the Federal Reserve System. So I don't know, some kind of reimagining of how the financial system works just needs to be done, period. And that probably will involve at least a temporary period of nationalization. I don't see any other way around that. And you don't want like a reform, you want to just rewrite the rules. You want to say like, this is what banking looks like now in the 21st century. And everything before was archaic and stupid. It's a dangerous move, but I don't see any way around this. You know, when Caesar finally comes, or when collapse finally comes. Massa Damnata for $5 Australian. That a loan is unserious or not has nothing to do with the amount of interest charged. It's whether the contract has the borrowers personally as the guarantor rather than some clearly defined collateral. I'd love you to do a video on Zippy Catholics' frequently asked questions. Oh, the loan is usurious. It has nothing to do with the amount of interest charged. It's whether the contract has the borrower personally as the guarantor rather than some clearly defined collateral. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. What does it mean to have the borrower? Like, if I take a loan out for a home loan, I have to have, I mean, I guess the home is the collateral, right? But if I take, so like, are all auto loans sort of usurious because I guess they could repossess the car? I don't know. This is not very clear to me. This definition seems like it's born of a different age. People are going to take loans out and they're going to have collateral for these loans, but there's a certain amount that is going to not be covered by the collateral in the event of a default, and that default is going to have to be absorbed by somebody, and it will, in our current system, that will be a Chapter 11 hearing, and based on how our Chapter 11 works currently, it will most likely be the investor that takes most of that haircut. But I'll read Zippy Catholic's frequently asked questions. Okay, Marco Pulio for $3. Forever War is a great read. Forever Peace is skippable. Well, yeah, I don't know. I didn't even know there was Forever Peace. I only knew it was Forever War. But glad to know that there is a sequel to that. And I recommend it. The other one I recommend, Canticle for Leibowitz, which is even, I think, better than Forever War. Soul Acolyte for $10 USA. My friend is depressed incel, addicted to creature comforts. He has 3 friends, including myself, and does nothing but smoke weed. WFH, play video games, and jerk off. work from home, play video games, and jerk off. I urge him to go to therapy and try new things, but he never listens. It saddens and angers me that he wastes his life. What would you do? I would get him to go out with you to do some activity outside. That's fun. Take him on a hike. Do sports together. Do racquetball. I guess pickleball is like for old women, but something like that, right? There's a lot of sports that don't involve very much investment and that are reasonably fun for people who are kind of indolent and sedentary. And I say that having a sedentary job myself, there are plenty of sports that are pretty good for that. Just get him outside doing things socially with people. I don't see why, maybe that's really the beginning of anything, right? And that's all you can do for friends. I mean, this guy is your friend. He's not your son. So you can't force him to do anything. That's impossible. So, I mean, if he were my son, or if I had some kind of power over him, I'd just try to take away the weed, take away the pornography if I could. Or whatever. But you can't do that, realistically speaking. So the best thing you can do is get him in contact with things that are healthy and talk those things up. Name one competitive thing you do, hopefully not digital, that you can get good at, and that you can look at people who do it better than you and say, man, I wish I could be more like that. Once you're talking about things in that capacity, I believe that encourages a certain amount of positive introspection and positive improvement in young men. Young men work on the aspirational model, on hero worship. And even if it's like a master painter of miniature soldiers, or even if it's like a dumb band or something like that, like a rock band, or I don't know, anything like that. You have to admire. I mean, who are his heroes? Is there an answer for that? I mean, hopefully it's not like a parody hero. Like, I mean, Sam Hyde is kind of a hero, so that's probably a bad example. But back in the day, stoners would always give you these heroes like Jay and Silent Bob, who are like, or Cheech and Chong, like comedians who their whole shtick is that they're losers when, obviously in real life, they're like multi-million-dollar actors or whatever, or writers. And young men, they treat these guys like heroes because, like, oh man, I want to be just like this caricature of these useless stoners. But no, seriously, like, who are this guy's heroes? And why don't you want to become more like those heroes? Those are the questions you want to ask, and getting him outside doing things is probably the best way to do that. Sometimes the best way to do that is to sort of kind of do days together where you do some kind of like nerdy hobby, like Magic the Gathering night, but before that you go on a hike, right? That can, or a board game night, but during the day we're going to go on a hike, or we're going to lift weights or something like that. Like that's a good way to kind of, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, so to speak, right? Alternative avenues for $3 USA. Very happy you could post your Sildings 22 speech. Legit want to include it in future rhetoric or speech course. Well, you have my permission to use it if you want to. Bravo, bravissimo, encore. Got any info or scopes on Sildings 23? Hoping to attend. Well, I will definitely be in attendance. I have known nothing about it other than that. I know it's happening, or I hope it's happening, a disaster notwithstanding. And I'm really, really wondering what direction I should take my speech. Anglo Ortho gave my favorite speech at the last one, and he really focused it on spirituality. And so I think I owe it to people to give a more spirituality-focused speech at the next Sildings conference, but I really need to think about it. But thank you, Alternative Avenues. And my voice is giving way, so I need to hurry. Glow in the dark for $3 USA. FTX is a petri dish of stuff wrong in the system. Banks are a big problem. I think banks have infinite fractional reserve banking. Infinite fractional reserve. I'm not so sure what that means. Infinitely small fractional reserve. They can print as much money as they want, no cap. Well, I mean, the Federal Reserve can do that. And at 0% interest rates, the banks are effectively doing that as well. The problem is that we seem to have reached a limit with low interest rate growth, which is why the Fed's constantly playing chicken with high interest rates to fend off inflation while crashing the economy. All right, thank you very much. Glow in the dark for $3 USA. The left only took up issues like races getting along to gain power and to control that issue. Now it is shown that they can never cared about that at all and only wanted to club against the right. Yes, indeed. Another thing the left doesn't care about, diversity and multiculturalism. The left hates diversity. They want homogeneated widgets. They want the video game pot smoker in every country. They want the transsexual pervert in every country. They want everywhere to look like the most degenerated areas of San Francisco. And they want everyone to consume the same pop culture and the same primary color rainbow crap and the same Marvel movie slop again and again and again. They don't want diversity. They don't want multiculturalism because diversity and multiculturalism are scary. They're real. Real multiculturalism has jagged edges. It has hierarchies. It has asymmetries. It has real risks and real rewards and real commitments that you can't get out of. Personal choice ends in multiculturalism, and the left doesn't want that. It's that simple. But thank you for your contribution, and I'm finally at the last one of the night and ready to read the psalm and rest my voice. Glow in the dark for $5 USA. You can tell a lot people aren't dumb, but they use all of that mental power for less than great things. Just ask a sports guy the stats on teams. If we could even get 10% of that energy used for better things, we could solve many things. Bread and circuses is now. Well, yeah, I agree with you. But the problem is, glow in the dark, is that you don't need 10% of everyone's brain. You need 100% of a few people's brains. And the problem with the right wing right now is that, we're still building our network of tens. And by the standards of the next generation of true right-wingers, the tens of today will be ones. We don't really have down yet what it truly means to be a fanatic for the right. Like for me, this is a side hobby. I have a day job where I work 10 hours. I have a family. I have financial obligations. I can't be a perfect 10 in the way that we really need it. And, 10% of everyone's brain power is great if you're trying to sell a product, but it's useless when it comes to actually owning anything because 10% of anyone can own anything. Ownership comes from the individual and the individual actor and the people who are able to obey a covenant and the person that's able to obey a vow. And that requires more than 10% of somebody's brain, unfortunately. But at any rate, I'm finally done, guys. I'm at time. I'm 10 minutes over, so we will read the psalm for tonight, and then I'll wish you guys a pleasant evening. Okay, today is Psalm 66. I just incremented from last week. Cry out with joy to God, all the earth. O sing the glory in his name. O render to him glorious praise. Say to God, how tremendous your deeds. Because of the greatness of your strength, your enemies cringe before you. Before you all the earth shall bow, shall sing your name. Come and see the works of God, tremendous his deeds among men. He turned the sea into dry land. They passed the river dry shod. Let out our joy, let then be him. He rules forever by his might. His eyes keep watch over the nation. Let rebels not rise against him. O peoples, bless our God. Let the voice of his praise resound. Of the God who gave life to our souls and kept our feet from stumbling. For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You led us, God, into the snare. You laid a heavy burden on our backs. You let men ride on our heads. We went through the fire and through water, But then you brought us relief. Burnt offerings I bring to your house. To you I will pay my vows, the vows which my lips have uttered, which my mouth spoke in my distress. I will offer altar offerings and fatlings with smoke and the burning of rams. I will offer bullocks and goats. Come and hear all who fear God. I will tell what he did for my soul. To him I cried aloud, with high praise ready on my tongue. If there had been evil in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. But truly God has listened. He has heeded the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, who did not reject my prayer, nor withhold his love from me. That is the end of Psalm 66. Everyone have a wonderful rest of the evening and a good rest of the week. I will see you all next Tuesday. Good night and God bless.